The Demon King unleashed his full power. The battlefield fell silent, and what was running through the hero's mind was something else entirely. This season's rewards should be enough for a down payment. That unit by the Han River, 3 bedrooms, 1 living room, south-facing, great light. He'd had his eye on it for 2 months. The agent said if he didn't commit by the end of this month, the price was going up. Honestly, if it weren't for the money, he'd have quit this line of work a long time ago. Dangerous, exhausting, and having to perform that whole noble savior expression on a global livestream. But the market rate for saving the world? Not bad at all. It all started when Earth became a game. Massive demon towers fell from the sky. Monsters poured out from the towers and began slaughtering humanity without mercy. Despair, like the end of days, blanketed the entire world overnight. The demon towers had to be cleared within a time limit to stop the disaster from spreading. Kang Yoo-seong, undisputed #1 server-wide for 4 straight years. 5 seasons, 5 times standing on the final battlefield. Every single time, him. Documentaries played about him on TV. People went crazy buying his merchandise and plushies. Governments held secret meetings debating if he ever went down, what would the world do? The day the final Demon King of Season 5 arrived, the cultists finished their ritual ahead of schedule. The Demon Stone erupted in a blinding flash of light, then shattered. The difficulty of the entire tower spiked instantly, nightmare level. A towering figure emerged from the light, the Plague Sovereign. He wielded twin blades, his attack spreading like a plague across the battlefield. Countless serpentine tentacles swept across the arena. Players fell one after another. The holy maiden Maria gritted her teeth and held on, her whole body trembling. Lei Chang, the man who called himself the Swordmaster, completely broke at that moment. He turned and ran, abandoning everyone behind him without a second thought. The Demon King gave chase. A killing blow was charging up. Everyone shut their eyes. Then, a figure stepped in the way. Moving so fast he left only after images. 1 second of silence. Then the entire battlefield erupted. The Hero King! He's here! Kang Yoo-seong felt the weight of everyone's gaze on him. Fine. In the next instant, a brilliant pillar of blue light detonated. That light swallowed the Demon King whole. Victory rippled from the battlefield to every screen on the planet. The system's announcement rang across the sky, generously distributing the season rewards. The world bought itself another year. Kang Yoo-seong tiredly pulled up the reward settlement screen, ran the math in his head. After tax, still short, still just a little short for the down payment. Humanity celebrated the victory with a global livestream event. The host introduced his legend in the most passionate tone imaginable. 4 years of undisputed #1, the Hero King who saved the world. Little girls hugged their plushies and cheered. Passers-by buzzed with excitement. The host invited Kang Yoo-seong to say a few words. He said nothing. Maria nudged him from the side, quietly urging him to say something decent. After all, this was a global broadcast, attended by the world's finest players. The host emphasized again, this was a heroic act of protecting the world. Kang Yoo-seong just smiled and said he did everything for the money. Those words hit like a thunderclap. The entire venue went silent. Maria looked like she was about to faint, her face etched with pure despair. He kept going, started pitching his merchandise. That night, back home, Kang Yoo-seong scrolled through the player forums. He came across one post that made him break into a cold sweat. A reporter had announced they'd stake out his home on the first day of the new season. When the day came, he pulled back the curtains. Sure enough, reporters were packed in the street below. He couldn't stand being watched. Better to walk out himself than to hide. Reporters swarmed him instantly, shoving microphones in his face and firing 7 or 8 questions without pause. Kang Yoo-seong didn't flinch. He smiled. You know that kind of statement? When a celebrity gets caught doing something? I've done a lot of reflecting, I hear you, and effective immediately I'll be taking a step back to focus on my healing journey. 2 seconds of silence. Nobody had any idea what he was getting at. Then the ground started shaking. The system notification drowned out everything else. New season beginning. Demon towers forming. Players, please confirm your information before entering. The scene erupted into chaos. He pulled his cap low and slipped into the crowd. Behind him, flyers printed with his face scattered across the ground and drifted away in the wind. He arrived at his destination. The area was completely deserted. No sane player would show up here on day 1 of a new season. System notifications chimed one after another. Multiple sovereigns, amused by his recent performances, had bestowed their protection. Kang Yoo-seong read through the notifications and nodded, satisfied. None of it was a coincidence. The UN speech, the meltdown at the association ceremony, that line on the global livestream, it's all for the money. All of it served the same purpose, making those high and mighty sovereigns laugh. Last time's performance had earned him a precious random protection draw. These protections didn't expire when a season ended. They carried over and stacked. Without hesitation, he claimed all his accumulated unreceived rewards at once. He was hoping for something legendary. The light faded. A legendary black coat. He shook it out and put it on, straightening the collar. Not bad. He stepped into the tower. First floor. The ground shook the moment his feet touched down. Level 3 tower. Blood Moon Half-Orc Tribe. Nothing surprising. He was actually looking forward to this. The divine tier skill he'd just gotten hadn't been tested yet. The Frostblade took shape in his palm. The system added 2 bonus effects to the blade. He offered a polite word of thanks and swung. Cold air surged outward with the blade. The front row of half-orcs didn't even finish changing their stance. They just froze in place, lined up neatly, like a collection of oddly posed ice sculptures on display. He walked through the middle of them. System, first floor cleared. Good feel. Well then, might as well save the world while he was at it. Second floor. floor. Still half orcs. He sighed, couldn't be bothered going around. He charged straight in. By the time the system notification sounded, he was already standing at the entrance to the 4th floor. The non-stop clearing had left him slightly winded. This tower had no rest floor. Whoever designed it apparently thought challengers had infinite stamina. He hadn't caught his breath before another notification came. The Warsong Royal Guard had sealed off the path ahead. These ones looked different. Every face carried the kind of look that said they weren't going to go down easy. No preamble. They charged. Kang Yoo-seong sidestepped the first hit and tried to counter. The feel was wrong. They were a lot harder to break than he'd expected. He scanned his skill bar fast, nothing good for breaking their defense. Keep dodging. He thought of the item he'd brought in at the start. Hero-grade artifact. Ice crystal armor. Frostbite risk. But this wasn't the time to be picky. A massive axe came spinning straight at his face. Equip, the system responded. Cold energy spread from his spine and flooded his limbs. The blade took on an eerie blue glow. The axe was still coming down. It hit his arm, now encased in ice armor, and snapped with a sharp crack. He didn't step back. He grabbed the handle. Cold spread through the point of contact. The first elite didn't have time to pull free before he locked in place. The rest caught on and swarmed from every direction. The sword started changing. The more he killed, the more it upgraded, growing heavier and larger with each one. He liked this feeling. One sweep froze both the fist and the person behind it. A few more charged from the flank. He didn't look back, just swept the blade tip across. Another upgrade. The great sword split into two. Lighter. Faster. Now this was the feel he liked. A low sweep paired with the blade sent the nearest half-orc straight into the ceiling. Energy kept building, coiling around both blades in a spiral. Kill one, gain one stack. He was starting to understand why people got addicted to this. His blade paths grew denser and denser until there was almost no space between them. Their weapons broke. Their line broke with it. He was about to wrap up when he sensed something behind him, miscounted by one. His edge was slipping. He couldn't be bothered dragging it out. He gathered a frost orb on the spot and shoved it forward. Elite floor cleared. The system issued a special reward. He opened it. Common skill. He stared at it for 2 seconds and sighed. Better than nothing. Equipped. Keep going. Automata's voice popped up. Oh, you're still alive? Spare me. He pulled up his points balance. He'd built up quite a lot. Spend it while you're breathing. Dying with points left is such a waste. He flipped through the catalog. 1 speed potion, 1 fire potion. Then he clamped his hands over his ears and blocked out whatever sales pitch came after. System, entry to the final Demon King floor complete. A shadow lunged at him. He threw up a shield on instinct. The shield shattered. He stepped back twice and looked up at the thing in front of him. Those half-orcs from the earlier floors looked like children by comparison. He threw the fire potion he'd just bought. The explosion was deafening. Flames swallowed half the room. The Demon King thrashed around inside the fire. Couldn't find his target. The rage kept stacking. Kang Yoo-seong was already behind it. He lined up the heart and drove the blade in with everything he had. The sword punched straight through that massive body. Liquid sprayed from the wound. He jumped clear. The Demon King didn't fall. The system warning fired at the same time. The Demon King had entered berserk. He glanced at the countdown. Nothing he hadn't dealt with before. Ice shield up. First wave absorbed. That force, taking a direct hit would probably be fatal. So naturally, he wasn't going to take it head on. He drank the speed potion and felt himself become noticeably lighter. The Demon King's fist grazed his face and slammed into the ground, sinking half a meter deep. He counted the seconds in his head. Berserk had a duration. Just outlast it. He wasn't in a hurry to attack. He dodged each hit with the smallest movement necessary. With 30 seconds left, he already knew this one was his. On the count of 3, he snapped his fingers. Berserk expired. The Demon King's legs gave out and it crashed to the ground. System, Demon Tower cleared. He looked at the settlement screen and frowned slightly. Too smooth. Suspiciously smooth. The gift pack opened. Common item. He'd already seen it coming. He sighed and turned toward the next tower. He heard screaming the moment he walked in. A bunch of little things shrieking that they were going to tear this heretic apart. Kang Yoo-seong spread his hand, said nothing. Ice crystals formed and fired. Clean. Skill upgrade notifications popped up one after another. He was in a decent mood. He'd just finished one wave. The second one came. He swung. Didn't overthink it. Frost spread. The imps froze one by one, becoming a neat row of silent decorations. He cleared his way to the top floor without much trouble. The boss appeared, the imp cult, radiating fury. It declared it would offer his blood to the demon lord. The cultist charged along with it. He raised his sword. No particular thoughts. Just cut. System freeze effect triggered. He remembered the skill he'd just equipped hadn't been tested. Good timing. Ice spikes rained down from above, then burst up from the ground and became ice lances. He grabbed one, used the momentum and hurled it. The point of impact froze solid instantly. More lances followed, pinning the Demon King in place. The final strike. The shriek cut off. System reward. Random equipment voucher. He looked at it for a moment. No enthusiasm. System. A faction is observing you. Not unusual. In the Demon Tower world, deals between factions and powerful players happened all the time. This time it was the Shadow Council. They surrounded him. They extended an invitation, phrased beautifully. Something about sharing in hidden whispers. He already had a read on them. Worth considering. But he didn't agree right away. You've made quite a few enemies, haven't you? They said their shield was strong enough. Nothing to worry about. It's precisely because I know that I have to think carefully. He gave a cold laugh. He didn't need pretty words. He needed something concrete. A shadow beast and 1 dark skill card. He named his terms. Not a tone that invited negotiation. Silence on their end. You think very highly of yourself. Kang Yoo-seong shrugged and turned to leave. Sure enough, he'd barely turned around before they called him back. A black creature emerged from the shadows. Like a cat, but not quite. System, Shadow Beast obtained. The creature lowered its head and rubbed against his ankle. He crouched down and petted it, satisfied. The Shadow Blade skill card appeared alongside it. Only then did he nod. Deal. System, alliance with the Shadow Council officially established. He was in a decent mood walking out. Then Then he heard someone calling his name. He sighed. Trouble stuck to him like something he couldn't scrape off no matter what. Reporters swarmed him again, this time to congratulate him on clearing 2 level 3 towers in a single day. Obviously, because I'm good. He had no intention of being modest. Then another piece of news cut in. The sword master from a neighboring country had cleared a level 4 tower. How many went in? He asked. 5 entered, 4 dead. He understood immediately, used his teammates as shields and walked away with the reward himself. Clean work if nothing else. The sword master has entered a level 5 tower alone, the reporter added. Kang Yoo-seong laughed. Charging a level 5 tower on day 1. This guy had a death wish. Going all out at the start of a season was terrible value. Basic knowledge. Unless he'd pulled something exceptional from his last run and couldn't wait to test it. What's your take? The reporter pushed the microphone forward. Idiot. A beat of silence from everyone. So am I, he added. If we're both idiots either way, might as well be the idiot who wins. He tracked down the tower the sword master had entered. The moment he stepped in, he knew this wasn't just about proving a point. He was going to take down the man who'd used his teammates as cannon fodder in the very same tower. The tower's world setting appeared, a war between the Empire and the Kingdom, with the odds heavily against the Kingdom. The system required him to choose a side, specifically the one he considered just. The sword master had chosen the Empire, the dominant side. Of course, that suited him perfectly. The worse the odds, the better the reward. And wherever the sword master wasn't, that was where he belonged. He chose the Rhodia Kingdom, no hesitation. His landing point was a crumbling fortress. When the garrison saw him arrive, someone's eyes went red on the spot. He scanned the war council room. The air had that particular heaviness that came right before people started dying. Who's the highest ranking officer here? The soldiers looked at each other. Nobody spoke. Then a short, pudgy man walked in. Before he could say anything, the man was already lecturing him about his lack of manners. He rattled off a list of titles. Noble defense commander, with unmistakable self-satisfaction. Then came the speech about morale and honor, with zero awareness of how dire their situation actually was. Kang Yoo-seong waited until the last word left his mouth, then hit him in the stomach. I'm in command now. He dusted off his hands, casual about it. The soldiers didn't intervene. A few of them couldn't hold back and laughed. He climbed to the top of the battlements and surveyed the terrain. This world had no magic. Both sides were capped in what they could bring to bear. The sword master was the Iron Sovereign's apostle, equally constrained by this world's rules. Ordinary players could only contract with one sovereign, limited resources coming in. No matter how much a sovereign favored their apostle, they couldn't break the rules, unless there was an exception, and he happened to be that exception. The Jester Sovereign's particular fondness let him receive rewards from multiple sovereigns simultaneously. That was the foundation of his confidence in betting on this fight. He ran the numbers and smiled. Worth it, but he couldn't hold this alone. He needed these soldiers to actually want to fight. Word of the fat noble going down spread through the entire fortress quickly. The garrison's bearing visibly shifted, not waiting to die anymore, but something closer to wanting to fight. That's enough to work with, Kang Yoo-seong thought. The Empire's forces arrived, far more than expected. The base of the walls filled up in an instant. If the vanguard wasn't suppressed, the line would collapse immediately. Kang Yoo-seong didn't move. He called Xiao He. The big creature didn't have a name yet. He called out Xiao He without thinking. A massive black creature pulled itself out of the shadows and landed on the battlements. Both sides froze. The Empire's general shouted down the ones trying to fall back and ordered the formation held. The next second, Xiao He was already in the middle of them. Spikes erupted from its back and drove into every body within reach. No misses. The general's next order died in his throat. Frost followed and sealed everything in that area. Kang Yoo-seong stood on the battlements and watched from a distance. He whistled and let Xiao He handle the cleanup. The rest of the wall was still in combat. He swept his sword and sent a wave of frost rolling out, but his eyes kept scanning. The sword master still hadn't shown himself. He knew showing himself first was a risk. It was the same as voluntarily giving away his position. But he wasn't afraid of a direct fight. Being defeated inside a tower like this just meant being expelled, not real death. The longer the sword master stayed hidden, the more certain Kang Yoo-seong became about what was coming. The sun began to slide west. The colors on the battlefield deepened toward red. He was getting impatient. Then the things on the ground started moving. The blades lodged in fallen bodies trembled, one after another. Then they pulled free and hung suspended in the air. Dozens of them. The swordmaster had finally made his move. Kang Yoo-seong jumped clear. The first wave of swords passed through the spot where he'd been standing. He spread ice shields in the air, stacking them in layers. You hid that long for this? He said, unimpressed. Though I haven't been idle either. Flying swords came in waves. He cut down several, and the rest shattered against the ice shields. On the surface it looked like the swordmaster was controlling things and he was on defense. He wasn't worried. He tightened his grip and pushed the cold outward. A mass of flying swords froze midair and dropped, clattering across the ground. The rest kept circling, but they couldn't get close. That doesn't work on me. He said it plainly, not as a taunt, just a statement of fact. The words had barely left his mouth when a blast of light erupted behind him. He didn't panic. He didn't dodge. A reflection shield expanded at his back, flooding the space with gold in an instant. The attack went straight back the way it came. When the light cleared, the two of them were face to face for the first time. Kang Yoo-seong assessed his condition. All that effort, and this is what you have to show for it? The swordmaster steadied himself. Do you know what the real victory condition is in this tower? Defeating you. He answered his own question, tone even. Kang Yoo-seong had already figured that out. He hadn't entered this tower to defend any kingdom. Choosing the empire was just an excuse to stand against him. Every player should be a hero protecting the world. The swordmaster said it with complete sincerity. And someone like you has no right to stand at the front. Kang Yoo-seong didn't engage with it. He only asked one thing, your 4 teammates, who protected them? The swordmaster paused. The expression on his face broke apart. Then came anger, pure, mindless fury, driving him forward. Kang Yoo-seong met it without force, just redirected. People like you die before people like me. But under the weight of that anger, the swordmaster's attacks became suddenly unpredictable. One strike broke through his defense. He looked up. Kang Yoo-seong stood at a higher position, expression completely unchanged. You just use emotion as a weapon, Kang Yoo-seong said flat, like he was summarizing something tedious. At the same time, he sensed movement behind him. He twisted to avoid Xiao Hei's lunge from behind, stumbling slightly as he landed. The swordmaster steadied himself. All the sovereigns are watching. Someone like you will be dealt with eventually. Kang Yoo-seong actually laughed. I'm not interested in fighting you. He was already moving before he finished the sentence, charging straight toward the swordmaster. The swordmaster adjusted his stance to meet the charge, and Kang Yoo-seong's figure swept past his side, cleared the wall, and dropped. The swordmaster stood there frozen. His target was never the swordmaster. It was the Empire's command camp in the rear. The swordmaster finally understood. Kang Yoo-seong had shown himself from the start, not to rally morale, not to confront him directly, but to hold his attention here, so that at the most critical moment, he would have none left. The Empire's rear soldiers saw a player charging at them, and immediately lost their footing. The swordmaster's expression shifted, and he gave chase. The command camp was already in chaos. Someone was shouting to get the Duke out. The tent was split open from outside. Kang Yoo-seong walked in. He scanned the room and found his target. A flash of the blade. The guards' shouts cut off. Duke Ballermut crumpled in shock. The swordmaster arrived to find exactly this scene. His eyes looked ready to split. Weren't you hiding this whole time? Kang Yoo-seong turned around. Why show up now? All I needed was to stop their advance. That's a win. He added it as an afterthought, completely matter of fact. The swordmaster came at him like a man out of his mind, but his figure was already going transparent. System: the Battle of Palace concluded. The Empire's command structure had collapsed. Full retreat. The outcome was decided. The victory emblem appeared before him. Demon Tower cleared. System reward: vitality replenished, along with the option to take 1 skill card from the defeated opponent. The swordmaster roared a vow of revenge before fading. That hysterical voice dissolved into the air. Kang Yoo-seong selected sword mastery hero grade, took it, filed away, done. The exhaustion came fast and dragged him under. The same dream again. That voice, thick with temptation, asking him if he wanted to be a hero. Just like every other time, he bent down and picked up the mask from the ground. The Jester Sovereign's laughter tore through the dream. He would become the greatest hero among heroes, and then he would be forever misunderstood. The greatest laughingstock of all. He put on the mask and sealed the contract. Every single time he dreamed this, it ended the same way. He jolted awake. His back was soaked. Someone was pounding on the door. He sighed and went to open it. Well, look who it is. He said it in a tone that suggested the opposite of welcome. Park Tae-shik, director of the National Intelligence Agency, contracted to the Assassin Sovereign, ranked 30th server-wide. You look like you didn't sleep either. Park Tae-shik walked in already complaining. The whole world had been a mess since the season started. Why the hell aren't you answering your phone? He didn't finish before something caught his foot and nearly sent him sprawling. He looked down. Dirty dishes everywhere. You live like this? Don't call me that. Kang Yoo-seong frowned and kicked the dishes aside. He bent down to pick things up and mentioned offhand that there was beef noodle soup on the stove. Really good. Park Tae-shik looked at him and dropped onto the couch. Fine, get me a bowl. The scene was too familiar enough to sting a little. When they'd first met, the world hadn't yet become what it was now. Kang Yoo-seong had been 15 then, the best player at any internet cafe in the area. Park Tae-shik ran the place. The first time he saw him, he knew he was different, and then he'd stuck around, something that couldn't be shaken off. To get him onto the professional track, this man had personally gone to his parents and talked for an entire afternoon. After that, he covered his food and housing, helped him train, raised him more or less like a son. He was almost 18, on the verge of making his debut as a professional player. Then the first demon towers came down. No warning at all. He'd been cornered by monsters on the top floor, crammed into a corner, not knowing whether he was going to die there. Park Tae-shik came, with nothing but a kitchen knife. He just stood in front of him, didn't say a word. The monsters died. They got out. Kang Yoo-seong's legs hadn't stopped shaking the whole time. He got home. His parents were dead. He remembered the light that afternoon, remembered what it felt like to have nothing left in his head. Park Tae-shik stayed beside him the whole time, didn't leave, didn't say anything unnecessary. He became the only pillar Kang Yoo-seong had left, the only person he couldn't afford to lose. The noodles came out. Neither of them spoke. They ate in silence. Park Tae-shik set down his bowl. I'm here about something. The association. Kang Yoo-seong paused. That place that treated players like pieces on a board? What did they want from him now? The association's player academy? Graduation exam next week. Park Tae-shik paused. They want you to be the examiner. They called it an invitation, but there wasn't a trace of flexibility in how it was framed. Park Tae-shik said he'd been ready to decline on his behalf. This was obviously another trap. Kang Yoo-seong said, I'll go. I want to see what they've actually produced. One condition. The exam is scheduled for 5 in the morning tomorrow. 5 in the morning. The exam hall was full of muffled complaints. The graduating students watched him with a mixture of awe and wariness, uncertain whether he was here to help them or wreck them. Director Lee Sung-ho stood at the front and ran through the academy's training results with practiced fluency, quietly, barely concealing his pride. Jiang Yucheng looked at the students. He understood everything. He didn't wait for Lee Sung-ho to finish. He summoned his longsword. "I'm running the test. I decide who passes." Lee Sung-ho smiled and nodded, utterly confident. Then what followed shattered that confidence completely. Jiang Yucheng's blade went through them one by one. Nobody lasted 3 exchanges. The exam hall grew emptier and emptier. In the end, only one girl remained, sitting on the floor with no strength left to stand, her eyes carrying the look of someone who had given up. Jiang Yucheng sheathed his sword. She passes. Because she's lucky. He clapped his hands and said casually, "Go ahead and shut off all the cameras." The association's people couldn't sit still any longer. Several senior figures stormed in. They said he was making a mockery of things, said he had no respect for rules, said he'd betrayed his responsibilities as an examiner. These students, Jiang Yucheng cut them off. Which one of them got in on their own ability, using the association's resources to get their own people through the back door, then sending real players out to take the hits for them? That was what they'd been doing. Lee Sung-ho's face went red. He called him arrogant, ignorant, said he didn't understand the bigger picture. Then he dropped the pretense and said outright that players were strategic assets of the state, tools. The whole world does this. It's called maintaining peace. Jiang Yucheng wasn't angry. He just found it a little funny. He'd heard that line too many times. A subordinate came running in and whispered something in Lee Sung-ho's ear. Lee Sung-ho glanced at his phone. The color drained from his face instantly. The Academy's secrets, the full recording of today's test, had already exploded across the internet. Jiang Yucheng sighed, expression mournful. Barely built and already shutting down. What a shame. Lee Sung-ho turned and looked at him, and only then realized that from the very beginning every bit of this had been Jiang Yucheng's design. Jiang Yucheng could feel it. Somewhere, the Jester Sovereign was thoroughly entertained. A reward dropped into his hands without a sound. He didn't look at Lee Sung-ho again. He turned and left. Park Tae-shik was waiting outside. "The government has been waiting for this for a long time," Park Tae-shik said. "Thanks for playing along today." Jiang Yucheng didn't respond. He was already checking which level 5 towers were nearby. System, tower objective. Escort the merchant convoy and ensure the goods arrive at their destination safely. He landed. The sounds of fighting were already close. The convoy was surrounded by monsters. The defensive line on the verge of collapse. Jiang Yucheng dropped into the middle of the battlefield. He deployed the new skill he'd taken from the swordmaster, testing it out. The convoy members erupted in the kind of cheering that only comes from narrowly escaping death. They cried out that the god of light hadn't forsaken them. An apostle had come. Jiang Yucheng asked how much farther they had to go. 3 days. He was quiet for a moment. 3 days? I'll take watch tonight. Go rest. The convoy members placed all their hopes in this apostle of light. He, on the other hand, quietly placed his hopes in his newly acquired vitality necklace. He then unwrapped the Jester Sovereign's gift, and to his surprise, pulled out a precious high-grade growth stone. He decided to hold on to this unexpected windfall for now. Just then, several giant scorpions came crawling toward them. Jiang Yucheng called out Xiao Hei. The black cat's spikes shot out with a sharp whistle, but he didn't just stand back and watch. His longsword leapt from its sheath, sweeping a cold gleam across the monsters. The skill of controlling flying swords at will felt remarkably natural. The system announced a level up. The surge of power that came with it was intoxicating. He had barely wiped the filth from his face when an even larger shadow loomed up from behind, a twisted desert predator, its maw bristling with venomous needles. He gave a resigned smile. It looked like there would be no sleep tonight. With a single command, Xiao Hei clamped its jaws hard onto the creature's body. He drove dozens of flying swords in a rapid, relentless assault. A slight turn of the wrist, and the blades twisted and shredded through the monster from within. Extreme cold finally turned it into an ice sculpture and ended the threat. The next day, the convoy pressed on. A formation of knights was now riding alongside, clear as day. But during last night's brutal fight, none of these knights had been anywhere to be found. The convoy members addressed them respectfully as the valiant warriors of the God of Light. They belonged to the Blood Cross Knightly Order, and had spent the night guarding the goods. Jiang Yucheng's curiosity about those goods suddenly burned. The knights responded with a cold warning. He should focus on his own task. Their arrogance only made him more intrigued. Deploying light aura knights and even dispatching an apostle of light, the scale of all this was far too large. He deliberately provoked them, saying he wanted to see exactly what precious goods they were protecting. The knights were visibly angered, and the tension snapped taut. The convoy members panicked and tried to step in and calm things down, but they were yanked roughly aside by him. Jiang Yucheng took the blow that had been aimed at them. Cries of pain rang out as several convoy members were struck by arrows and crumpled. Black-robed heretics on black horses launched a quick ambush and pulled back just as fast. Jiang Yucheng recognized it as a guerrilla tactic and watched for the knights' reaction. The knight commander barked at them to protect the goods immediately. The lives of the convoy members were, as expected, completely beneath their concern. Fury rose in his chest. He wanted to give chase, but the system cut in to remind him, protect the convoy and safely deliver the goods. At the same moment, the heretics had already drawn their arrows at him. He hesitated no longer. He hurled his spear with both hands, the wind howling around it. The heretics laughed at him for throwing wild, but the next second, hidden spikes burst from the sand beneath them, sending man and horse tumbling. Jiang Yucheng leaped high into the air, ready to deliver the killing blow. Then his pupils contracted sharply, and he wrenched himself to a stop. He spotted what was hidden beneath the enemy's hood, the pointed ears of an elf. Stray arrows flew in, and Jiang Yucheng deflected them with his shield. The desert elf charged with a blade drawn, determined to cut down the heretic. Jiang Yucheng blocked the attack with ease, his mind rapidly sorting through the factions at play. He wanted to know what was hidden inside that carriage, but the elf gave a resolute order to their comrades, "Don't worry about him, just fire." A volley of arrows answered instantly. Jiang Yucheng spread his shield and covered the elf along with himself. The captured elf snarled that taking them prisoner was pointless. Jiang Yucheng told them to just say what was in the carriage, and fast. Once he heard the answer, he could decide which side he should be on. At that moment, the shield exploded and shattered into countless razor ice crystals. The ice blades hung suspended before every desert elf's face, cold and threatening. Jiang Yucheng pressed his sword against the elf's throat and demanded the truth about the goods. Under overwhelming terror, the elf finally confessed. It was their princess. Jiang Yucheng understood now. The heretics had kidnapped the elf's princess. He lowered his sword, let them go, and told them to take back a message. Better to survive and wait for another chance than to die here for nothing. The surviving elves rode off in confusion and vanished into the desert. The Knights of Light caught up and demanded to know why he had released the enemy. Jiang Yucheng paid them no mind and walked straight toward the prison carriage. One knight rode in front to block his path and forbade him from getting any closer. Jiang Yucheng summoned Xiao He as a silent threat. Then, amid the crowd's startled shouts, he wrenched the carriage door open. Inside was a woman, just as he expected, bound in iron chains. He asked if she wanted him to get her out. The princess bit back a furious refusal. She wanted nothing to do with the sympathy of a cultist. Then a system warning suddenly blared, pressing him to carry out the mission of light. Jiang Yucheng acted as though he hadn't heard a word. He raised his sword without hesitation and sliced through the chains. A notification popped up, hidden mission complete. The princess was stunned. The system announced that the Demon Tower's difficulty had escalated, from level 5 to hard. Jiang Yucheng smiled. The freedom this game offered really was unmatched. Then a cold punishment warning arrived. To betray the light was to pay a price. Several winged light watchers descended. The knights erupted in fervor, crying out for the execution of all those who had strayed. Jiang Yucheng scoffed at them. They were nothing but bullies hiding behind a powerful name. But he told the princess to stay calm, because he had backing of his own. At his quiet words, a completely different system tone rang out. The Shadow Sovereign endorsed his choice, and a curtain of darkness swept down. The knights' cheers died in an instant, replaced by trembling fear. Jiang Yucheng smiled with satisfaction. The rewards on this side were indeed better. Countless dark spikes erupted from the earth and pierced straight through the knights. The Light Watchers were both furious and shaken. They blazed with even fiercer golden radiance. But in a single flash of cold light, the lead Watcher was cleaved apart by one stroke. The remaining Watchers recoiled in terror, unable to accept the collapse unfolding before them. Jiang Yucheng's figure moved through the feathers of light, cutting them down one by one. The radiance finally went dark. The system updated the faction relations. The Light Watchers now treated him as a mortal enemy. The Shadow Council's affinity, on the other hand, had risen sharply. At the same time, the gazes of countless other factions were converging on this spot. The world of the Demon Tower and the world within the tower were worlds apart. The Blood-Crossed Knights and the Desert Elves were nothing more than creations of the tower. The sovereigns and their factions, however, belonged to the Demon Tower itself, a higher tier entirely. Players were special agents moving between two worlds. This granted them tremendous freedom within the rules. Just as Jiang Yucheng had now chosen to rescue the princess and trigger a hidden storyline. It was not a moment of impulse. It was a strategy he had calculated. Working with the Shadow Council and standing against the forces of light yielded greater gains. Besides, this was only a level 5 Demon Tower. The risk of punishment was relatively manageable. The rules constrained everyone, even the high and mighty sovereigns. No matter how furious the Light Watchers were, they couldn't bring a high-order angel down here. That was the confidence behind every move he made. It was all within his plan. The surviving Light Watchers roared about purging the darkness, but their attacks swept mercilessly through their own followers. The knights pierced by the light stared ahead with eyes full of shock and despair. Jiang Yucheng watched coldly, seeing plainly that they cared nothing for their followers. Just like the convoy members abandoned earlier, all of them were disposable pieces. The princess stood nearby, trembling with fear. A deadly beam of light came bearing down, and Jiang Yucheng charged forward and grabbed her. In the instant he dodged the attack, he summoned Xiao He, then crushed that precious growth stone in his palm. The light from the shattered stone flowed into Xiao He's body, and power began surging wildly. Several attacks came one after another, and the princess was terrified. Xiao He's body expanded suddenly, and planted itself in the way. Blasts of light hammered against its armored back but couldn't move it even a fraction. Jiang Yucheng stepped onto Xiao He's sharp spikes and launched himself into the air. The Light Watcher swung its holy sword to meet him, and the battle instantly reached a white-hot intensity. The shadow blades he controlled tangled with the enemy, but he could feel the strain building. A surprise attack came from the side. He barely managed to block it, but his cheek was still grazed by the cut. He hadn't expected the enemy to still be moving this fast even with his buffs active. Attacks from behind came in a relentless chain. The enemy weaved through the air with nimble ease, and it was starting to grate on him. He wanted a way to end the battle in a single blow. A thought flashed through his mind. Maybe he could try that new technique. But just as the power had gathered, an attack crashed in and scattered it entirely. Jiang Yucheng's body lurched as he struggled to regain his balance. But it was too late. A lance of light drove straight through him. Blood seeped from the corner of his mouth. The shadow blade in his hand went limp and fell. The Light Watchers closed in, their killing intent reaching its peak. At the very last second, a powerful protective force descended. The effect of one who cheats death activated, and he was restored to full condition. The Light Watchers sensed something was wrong. They shouted to cease the attack, but it was already too late. The swords around Kang Yoo-seong rose once more, forming an airtight barrier around him. He announced calmly that the game was over, and began his counterattack. Countless tiny ice blades became streaks of cold light, and tore through those radiant bodies. He stood atop a great sword, looking down at the last figure, scrambling to flee. The sword plunged down, bringing everything to an end. The system announced the battle was over, and all buff effects faded. He landed steadily as sunlight broke through the haze, illuminating the bodies strewn across the ground. Xiaohei returned to its small cat form and nuzzled affectionately against his ankle. He crouched down with a soft laugh and asked if it had shrunk a little again. Princess Celia approached cautiously. She asked in a trembling voice why he had turned against his own people. Kang Yoo-seong stroked the cat without a care and simply said the rewards on this side were better. The princess assumed he had rescued her to demand a ransom. He replied quietly that it was because he found human beings deeply unpleasant. The princess froze, seemingly unable to make sense of such pure, uncomplicated contempt. A few days later, he had escorted the princess to the border of the elf kingdom. The princess offered her sincere thanks. Kang Yoo-seong responded flatly that he had already received his payment. The princess held out a necklace, a token of her gratitude. The system notified him of an accessory of unknown grade acquired, possibly useful in the future. He pocketed the necklace without giving it much thought and turned to leave this world. Back in reality, he headed straight to Busan. It was a task Park Tae-shik had given him. The target was a woman known as a black player, Natasha. She had a notorious reputation, had been expelled from her home country and had entered the country illegally to operate out of Busan. When the train arrived, Park Tae-shik's call came chasing after him without fail. Kang Yoo-seong cut him off with a sigh and told him to hurry up and send a car. The voice on the other end informed him that Natasha's group had already entered a level 5 demon tower. He moved out immediately, heading for the zombie apocalypse disaster tower. The setting was a virus-ravaged city, and the objective was to survive until the designated time limit. 5 players had gone in before him. Stepping inside, even though he had braced himself, the sight still surpassed anything he had imagined. A revolting zombie made from the fused mass of countless bodies loomed before him. Kang Yoo-seong wondered if this thing could even be called a zombie anymore. He was about to draw his sword, when Xiaohei bounded ahead of him with excitement. It licked its lips, eyes gleaming with the look of something that had just spotted a supreme delicacy. After a few nimble leaps, the massive black shadow suddenly expanded. The shadow transformed into a colossal pitch-black whale and opened a maw like a bottomless abyss. It swallowed the writhing mass of flesh in a single bite, then sank back into the ground and disappeared. The growth stone had clearly done its job well. Xiaohei meowed with satisfaction and trotted back to rub against his feet. Applause rang out across the empty ruins. Natasha walked over with an amused smile. She had known all along that he would come. After all, a hero could never turn a blind eye to a force of evil. She laughed and shot back. Was he planning to drag her off and lock her up? Kang Yoo-seong looked at her with genuine puzzlement. What gave her the nerve to be this relaxed in front of him? He supposed his reputation in certain circles wasn't all that impressive. But he had long since figured out that she belonged to a foreign intelligence special operations unit. He asked whether she had lured him here, hoping the zombies would take care of him. Natasha smiled and admitted it freely. Kang Yoo-seong laughed inwardly. If Park Tae-shik hadn't told him she had a rare skill, he wouldn't have set foot in a place like this. Natasha dodged his feint with nimble ease, and gave the attack order with obvious relish. The ground beneath him suddenly exploded, and Kang Yoo-seong leaped clear at the last possible moment. Bullets poured down like a thunderstorm. He moved through them at full speed, weaving as he searched for an opening. Natasha glanced back and taunted him, as if victory was already hers. He thrust his longsword forward, only to find he had pierced nothing but a phantom. So this was the effect of the rare skill Dark Veil. Then he sensed something was off and snapped his head around. He blocked the attack from behind and realized there was a concealed sniper. Something about this didn't add up. The debuff effect of Dark Veil should have affected everyone equally, so why could the enemy still track him with such precision? He wrapped himself in layer after layer of overlapping shields as quickly as he could. At the same time, he called out to Xiaohei, asking it to sniff out the key to breaking the situation. Xiaohei agreed readily and melted without a sound into the shadows. One gunman was complaining about how thick the shields were and trying to think of another approach. Just then, a black cat appeared behind him. In the moment he let his guard slip, Xiaohei's spikes drove clean through his body. The other one recoiled in horror and bolted, trying to break out of the cat's shadow's range. Now Kang Yoo-seong understood. They could actually see Xiaohei's shadow. Just then, a cold blade pressed itself against his throat. Natasha's voice came from behind, ordering him to surrender immediately. Kang Yoo-seong calmly asked whether she actually had the ability to kill him. Natasha spoke with certainty, declaring she had broken him down completely through intelligence analysis. She ran through the unusual points she had tallied, his abnormal scores in tower raids, his distinctive patterns of behavior, and told him to dismiss the black cat first, after which they could negotiate terms properly. The smile on Kang Yoo-seong's face grew wider. He asked how exactly she intended to kill him. Before the last word was out, he grabbed her blade and drove it straight into his own throat. The edge passed through, and he was completely unharmed, because this was not his real body. Then 3 sword beams came to rest at Natasha's throat. Kang Yoo-seong suspected that what Natasha actually possessed wasn't the Dark Veil at all. His perception had been disrupted, yes, but nowhere near enough to throw him that far off. What she truly held was a legendary illusion technique capable of manipulating visual information. The blade in Natasha's hand clattered to the ground and dissolved into points of empty light. Kang Yoo-seong's skill window of the soul had locked her completely in place. She sank to the floor, pale-faced. Every calculation she had made had amounted to nothing. Kang Yoo-seong mocked her for being so sloppy with her craft. The one who should have been devoured by the zombie horde was her, not him. He was about to end the fight when a system notification suddenly fired off. A cold player death announcement made both of them freeze in place. The attacks between them halted. Then the capture alert from the Daily Corporation's forces blared across the area. Massive execution robots locked onto them and dropped from the sky. The classified protection protocol activated, and a devastating wave of attacks came crashing in. Another player death notification popped up, and the air went ice cold. Kang Yoo-seong's mind raced. Could his shields even take a hit like this? Lethal cannon fire came screaming toward both him and Natasha. He raised his hands in front of him, running through every option at lightning speed. Then in that moment of no escape, a bell rang out. The system sent a "what a shame" notification, and the fight was forcibly suspended. The shop materialized from nowhere, and the owner began complaining loudly, griping that 2 more people had died without spending their points, what a waste, and pinning all of it on Kang Yoo-seong. Kang Yoo-seong laughed and apologized. Automata demanded he buy a card pack as compensation before she would forgive him. Kang Yoo-seong steered the pitch toward Natasha, who was standing off to the side. Automata immediately swung to face her. She told her that Auntie was as good as dead. She might as well spend her points before the end, and that pulling a mythic card might just be the long shot that kept her alive. Natasha realized she was cornered and decided to make one last gamble. She named a massive amount of points and put it all toward random card packs. Even Kang Yoo-seong standing nearby was taken aback by the number, but what followed was an agonizing, drawn-out torment. Card after card, every single one a useless common. Natasha's breathing grew ragged, and the light in her eyes faded bit by bit. Automata kept cheering from the side, insisting that a mythic was absolutely going to come. Kang Yoo-seong watched it all with great interest, marveling at how entertaining it was to watch from the shore. The cards scattered across the floor stacked into a monument to her despair. Only a few cards were left now. She prayed desperately in her heart. Even one legendary would do. But when the light faded, it was still a worthless common card. Automata regretfully announced that her luck had run dry, and suggested picking up some potions. Kang Yoo-seong laughed at her. She truly would stop at nothing to make a sale. Automata instantly pivoted the pitch back to Kang Yoo-seong. She told him someone had just bulk bought to pad the odds, and the legendary drop rate had spiked. Natasha watched all of this, and the last thread of her sanity finally snapped. She broke down and screamed at Kang Yoo-seong and that cursed shop girl. Kang Yoo-seong thought she had a point, but bought one card anyway just to try his luck. The system notified him that he had received a common ice-type skill card. He smiled and said it beat having no skill he'd ever heard of. Natasha looked like she wanted to eat him alive when she heard that. Automata said her cheerful goodbyes, and the two of them were left alone. The notification sounded that the game was resuming and the giant robots reactivated. Executing the classified protocol, their objective was to eliminate all witnesses. Natasha gritted her teeth and readied herself to fight to the death. The next second, a flash of blade light passed her throat, faster than she could react. Kang Yoo-seong's figure didn't slow for a moment, and charged straight at the massive robots. He took out one first, clean and efficient. The remaining 2 immediately merged, and launched a combined attack of devastating power. Kang Yoo-seong narrowly escaped and still found time to quip about the pharmaceutical company's weapons. He even mulled over buying some of their stock when he got back. Then he gathered a cold glow into his palm. Countless ice spikes materialized in an instant. They rained down like a storm, riddling the robots with damage, and in a final explosion, the battle was declared over. The system issued its rewards. He could take one skill card from the defeated opponent. He chose Natasha's skill without a second's hesitation. Back in reality, players killed by other players could be revived. Kang Yoo-seong turned to leave. Natasha called after him, asking why he had let her live. He answered coolly that she could turn herself in if she liked. It was none of his business either way. Natasha still couldn't quite believe it. Only then did Kang Yoo-seong reveal his real reason. He needed a messenger. He told her to go out and let the world know that the Hero King was unbeatable, and that it would be wise not to try anything clever, or they would face the consequences. When Park Tae-shik heard the news, he called back and gave him an earful. Kang Yoo-seong brushed it off lightly, saying watching a card pull performance had to come with some kind of fee. That breezy indifference only made Park Tae-shik angrier. He reminded Kang Yoo-seong not to forget why those people had come in the first place. In the end, all he could do was grumble with frustrated disappointment and tell him to stay safe. Kang Yoo-seong thanked him with a smile for the concern and hung up. The train sped on, and his thoughts drifted to somewhere far away. In the world of the Demon Tower, they, the players, went by many names. And in the real world, the situation was startlingly similar. They were treated as weapons, a cold, quantifiable measure of combat power, and even called something as hollow as heroes. Kang Yoo-seong found the word dripping with irony. People like Natasha, who wouldn't hesitate for a second when it came to eliminating a target. Was that what the world wanted him to become? Just then, someone recognized him and started pointing and calling out, "Hero King." He quickly pulled his cap down low, but the murmurs behind him didn't stop. Someone said he looked like a thug. Another pushed back, saying he was actually quite polite in person. Listening to it all, Kang Yoo-seong could only let out a helpless sigh. Dawn was just breaking, and he was almost home, but reporters came swarming like hounds that had caught a scent, Rather than deal with the hassle, hiding inside a demon tower sounded far more peaceful. He jumped, and his figure vanished. When his eyes opened again, he had landed directly on a solemn altar. The crowd below erupted in fervent cheers, celebrating the success of the ritual. A woman who called herself the Holy Maiden greeted him in a tone that was almost operatic. Kang Yoo-seong slipped immediately into character, putting on his standard savior's smile. He took the Holy Maiden's hand and introduced himself as the warrior who had come to save the world. The Holy Maiden, Alicia, was deeply moved and began recounting the backstory. Starting from the ancient conflict between the Celestials and the demons, she talked on and on. Kang Yoo-seong endured it for half an hour before his patience ran out entirely. He cut her off and suggested they should leave at once to go save the world, but the Holy Maiden insisted the story had only reached the crucial part and pressed on with the briefing. Kang Yoo-seong's patience collapsed completely, and he turned to leave. The Holy Maiden rushed to stop him, asking how he planned to find the Ark without knowing where it was. At that moment of stalemate, the sky suddenly changed. A dark red energy twisted across it. A monstrous demon tore through the fabric of space and reached out with razor claws. The knights invoked holy names and charged, but their attacks barely scratched the surface. The demon gathered a terrifying orb of dark energy, its oppressive force blanketing the entire area. Kang Yoo-seong stepped forward and ordered everyone back. The Holy Maiden tried to help, but Kang Yoo-seong firmly blocked her. The next second, the shield let out a shattering groan under the strain, and the demon orb finally blew through the defense. He covered his face, as though absorbing a massive wave of pain and force, then relayed, in a trembling voice, the message the demon had left behind. The demon had declared its ambition, to seize the Ark and drown the world in darkness. The Holy Maiden broke out in a cold sweat, realizing the end was closer than she had thought. Kang Yoo-seong immediately pressed her. Were there any leads on where the Ark might appear? The Holy Maiden snapped out of her shock and frantically named a location. She threw all formality aside and set off at full gallop without another word. Walking behind her, Kang Yoo-seong allowed a quiet smile of satisfaction to cross his face. He murmured a compliment to Xiaohei for the demon roar it had just performed. The whole thing, the convincing threat, had been an act they had put on together. To maintain the disguise, he decided to seal away some of his more conspicuous abilities for now. The Holy Maiden glanced back, worried they were moving too fast. He smiled and told her there was no need to slow down. Sure enough, a little push in his own way, and the efficiency was unmatched. They arrived at the Adventurers Guild. The noise of the crowd mingled with rough laughter. The receptionist at the front desk handed them a wait ticket. The Holy Maiden quietly explained the history of this city to him. Built around an ancient labyrinth at its center, this neutral city was a place of opportunity and chaos, the ideal hiding place for the Ark. Their number was called, and they returned to the front desk. A document was slid across to them requesting their signatures. The Holy Maiden was about to sign when Kang Yoo-seong suddenly pressed her hand down. The clause stated, "Should you die in the labyrinth, your body and belongings would become property of the city." The receptionist smiled and said that opportunity always comes with risk. The Holy Maiden nodded in agreement. Kang Yoo-seong could only give a cold laugh and sign his name. The moment they stepped onto the first floor of the labyrinth, damp, chilling air hit them head-on. Kang Yoo-seong drew his longsword and positioned himself behind the Holy Maiden. Rat-shaped monsters shrieked and lunged at them. He blocked steadily. The Holy Maiden's blessing magic then blazed to life and cut the enemies down with precision. The two of them worked together with unexpected ease, cutting through everything in their path. By the time they reached the fifth floor, Kang Yoo-seong offered a rare word of praise. The Holy Maiden credited the adventurers they had encountered along the way. She smiled brightly, imagining a world where humanity stood together and helped one another. Kang Yoo-seong didn't share the sentiment. He knew it was nothing more than territorial jostling, but he didn't say so. He only promised to find the Ark for her. Before the words were even out, a hulking figure stepped into their path, demanding protection money in an overbearing, arrogant tone. Kang Yoo-seong understood immediately and whispered to the Holy Maiden that these were labyrinth bandits. Fear crept across the Holy Maiden's face, but she still stepped forward to try to talk. She appealed to both sides to settle things peacefully. Kang Yoo-seong played along with her, even spinning a tale about saving the world. He laid it on thick, calling himself a hero from another world, with the 37th Holy Maiden by his side, pleading with the bandits to let them pass, for the sake of world peace. The Holy Maiden stood beside him, nodding along with heartfelt sincerity. The bandits fell silent for a moment, then burst into earth-shaking laughter. The Holy Maiden stared in bewilderment, unable to believe this was the reaction. Kang Yoo-seong clenched his jaw. He had known exactly how this would go. He was done talking. His figure flashed like lightning and cut straight into the enemy crowd. Blade light flared, blood sprayed, and a severed hand flew through the air. A flying axe came at him from behind. He deflected it with a backhand swing. A woman stepped forward with killing intent in her stride, her voice both familiar and cold. Then he looked again in shock. It was the receptionist from the front desk. So the guild and the bandits had been in on it together all along. They squeezed every last bit of value from novice adventurers, including their lives. The Holy Maiden covered her mouth, unable to process the darkness she was seeing. The woman laughed madly and raised a massive axe, saying this was just the way of the labyrinth city. The axe came crashing down and was caught firmly by 3 interlocking longswords. Kang Yoo-seong tilted the corner of his mouth up and reminded her to watch where she was standing. The woman spun around in alarm. Countless black spikes erupted from the ground. Xiaohei surfaced from the shadows. The fight was over in an instant. Kang Yoo-seong took the stunned holy maiden by the hand and walked deeper into the labyrinth. In the dim ruins of an old shrine, the two searched separately, but found nothing. Kang Yoo-seong suggested they rest. The holy maiden simply nodded in silence. He had noticed that her color had been off ever since the encounter with the bandits. He asked if she was struggling to take in this darker side of the world. The holy maiden said she didn't understand. With the world on the brink of destruction, why were people still killing each other? She raised eyes that were beginning to glisten and asked if he had long since grown used to all of this. Kang Yoo-seong thought of that greedy, self-serving guildmaster and gave a quiet, cold laugh to himself. He answered evenly that the world was the same no matter where you went. The holy maiden stared into the flickering campfire and softly asked what his homeland was like. Kang Yoo-seong brought up the crises his homeland had gone through time and again. There was no one like the holy maiden there, no one who could foresee disaster and stop it. He had been holding up fine through the third crisis, but somewhere along the way, the people around him all started looking out for themselves. The holy maiden looked at him with concern and asked how he had coped back then. Kang Yoo-seong didn't answer directly. He turned the question back on her. The holy maiden thought for a quiet moment, then offered her guess. The answer caught Kang Yoo-seong off guard for just a beat, then he burst out laughing. He shook his head with a grin and said the holy maiden was reading far too much into it. The night had grown late, and the two of them gradually unwound in the warmth of the dancing flames. Kang Yoo-seong felt a strange, rare kind of peace. Just then, automata appeared out of nowhere before him. Perfect timing. Kang Yoo-seong had been meaning to prepare for the battles ahead. Several days later, they finally reached the 100th floor of the labyrinth. A deafening roar announced the arrival of the final monster. The holy maiden began to pray with quiet devotion. A warm and powerful light poured from her hands and enveloped Kang Yoo-seong. In the very instant the monster lunged to devour him, he brought his sword down in one clean stroke. The monster wailed and dissolved into points of light. The system declared the victory. The holy maiden walked to his side with a smile and thanked him sincerely. At that moment, a beam of light descended slowly from the top of the labyrinth. It was the ancient weapon they had fought so hard to find, the Ark. Kang Yoo-seong caught it, only to find it far more plain-looking than he had imagined. Before they could examine closely, the entire labyrinth began to shake violently. The sky was torn open by a tremendous force, opening a path to the outside. But what waited for them was not freedom. It was an army standing in full battle formation. The man at the head declared himself the first prince of the Draka Empire. He smiled with arrogant ease and thanked them for finding the Ark on behalf of the Empire, then commanded them to hand over the treasure immediately. The holy maiden stepped in front of the Ark and told him he could keep dreaming. The prince only laughed with greater swagger and revealed his own Ark. Kang Yoo-seong moved the holy maiden behind him. The system notification sounded, announcing the curtain rising on the final act. The prince's personal guard surged forward like a wave. The holy maiden prayed again, pouring more blessings and strength into the warrior. Bathed in the light of those buffs, Kang Yoo-seong's blade cut through everything in its path. The royal guard collapsed rapidly, and voices around the prince grew urgent, urging him to retreat. The prince's face twisted. He refused to accept defeat. In his fury, he detonated the Ark in his own hands. Warning notifications flashed in a frenzy as wild energy swept in every direction. The prince's body swelled and warped within the energy, and became a terrifying monster. His mind was gone. He even struck the subordinates who came forward out of concern. Kang Yoo-seong observed with calm focus and asked the holy maiden for one final blessing. Amid her hymn-like prayer, he gathered ice around himself and forged it into armor. Then he hurled a potion and let the fire surround the monster. Clad in his ice armor, he plunged into the sea of flames. Sword light flashed like a meteor as the monster roared and thrashed inside the fire, swinging its massive claws to catch him. Kang Yoo-seong's figure suddenly vanished. It was only an afterimage. His real body had already leaped high into the air above. Sword leveled downward, the blade drove straight through the monster's body. Mibus finally fell, and everything came to rest. The system notification announced that all the final mission items had been gathered. A massive pillar of light descended from the sky and encased the ancient Ark. Its outer shell peeled away layer by layer, revealing a more refined and powerful core within. Kang Yoo-seong finally let out a breath and caught it steadily. At the same time, he received qualification to enter the Awakening Tower. He turned and held the Ark out toward the Holy Maiden, but she shrank back in alarm, insisting she had no right to wield such power. Kang Yoo-seong reassured her she was the best possible choice. Better her than someone without a brain holding it. He spoke from his own experience. Those who had been destroyed by power had usually fallen into obsession because their sense of responsibility ran too deep. But her ideal was to unite people, and that was exactly what the Ark's power was for. The Holy Maiden looked at the faint glow in her palm and finally let go of a long-held burden. A system notification followed, and Kang Yoo-seong left with quiet satisfaction. He had earned the Holy Maiden's deep trust and a special protection. Exhaustion settled over him, and when he got home, he fell into a deep sleep. When he woke, he realized this one tower had taken him an entire week. He laughed at himself for getting too relaxed, but shook it off quickly. A few days later, he went out again, only to run straight into a wall of reporters who had been lying in wait. Seeing no way to escape, he ducked into the nearest demon tower. The reporters stood there, baffled. The tower showed no information at all. A chilling thought formed. He had entered an awakening tower. Inside the tower, a voice remarked that it had been waiting for quite some time. Mirrors surrounded him on all sides, each reflecting a different version of himself. Kang Yoo-seong impatiently told it to get the test started. The reflection turned to face him and laughed laughed at his impatience. All the reflections shifted into battle stances. The mirrors shattered in an instant. He walked calmly through the fragments. Another figure came walking toward him. It was a Kang Yoo-seong wearing a jester's mask. Kang Yoo-seong showed no surprise. He simply crystallized an ice sword with cold focus. Both attacked at the same moment, two identical forces colliding mid-air. He dropped low and charged. The other answered with exactly the same sword technique. Every attack was replicated perfectly. Every block came at precisely the same moment. Ice spikes clashed against ice spikes. Dark blades crossed dark blades. Even the damage both of them took was completely identical. That familiar, nauseating feeling welled up again. He tried to summon his familiar, and was blocked by the rules. It seemed he would have to use the old method. He suddenly stopped and dropped his guard entirely, then swung his sword at the other with full force. The instant the blade pierced the other's body, a burst of agonizing pain erupted in his own chest. Both were run through by each other's sword in the exact same posture. The masked figure asked why he had to take everything so seriously. On this stage, one could become any role at will. If you can be a hero, you can just as easily be a villain. Why be so fixated? Because nothing in this world is worth taking seriously. Kang Yoo-seong ignored him and swung again. He grabbed that mask and tore it off with everything he had. The figure's head burst and splattered like murky water, then vanished entirely. The battle stopped abruptly, and only his heavy breathing remained in the empty tower. He picked up the jester's mask from the ground and slowly put it on his own face. He looked up into the void and asked if there was anything else to deal with. The jester's sovereign appeared and told him to take the new power with him. In a hospital in the real world, the smell of antiseptic hung in the air. Park Tae-shik sprinted down the hallway. Only when he saw Kang Yoo-seong lying in the bed did he finally let out a breath. Kang Yoo-seong immediately complained that he had shown up empty-handed, but Park Tae-shik heard from his sharp tongue that he was going to be fine. He deliberately urged the Hero King to get back out there and protect the peace. Kang Yoo-seong feigned weakness and claimed his chest had literally been run through. Park Tae-shik called his bluff without hesitation. He had obviously already used a recovery potion. Kang Yoo-seong let out a long sigh and admitted that this wound was genuinely different, because the one who had dealt it to him was his very unusual sovereign. The awakening required to reach level 50 was no small thing. His form of awakening required him to defeat another version of himself with his own hands, and the reward for winning was every skill and stat he had ever accumulated. He then shifted gears and asked directly what his next assignment was. Park Tae-shik's expression turned serious and said they needed to track down an arsonist. At that very moment, a building in the city was already being consumed by roaring flames. People were screaming and fleeing in terror, the scene a vision of hell. On the rooftop of a building across the way, someone was savoring every second of it. The agonized screaming reached him like beautiful harmonies. He raved to himself about conducting the masses toward a great work of art. An even fiercer explosion of flame drew a cold reward notification from the system. A group of armed agents closed in quietly, trying to apprehend the crazed arsonist. He caught a glimpse of them and gave a contemptuous sniff. Then his figure vanished in an instant. The pursuers realized with frustration that the suspect had already fled into a demon tower. Kang Yoo-seong walked past the scene without a word. He climbed to higher ground, and his gut told him this player was no hero. This was a madman with designs on burning the world, an extremely high-level threat. Without further hesitation, he gave the order and entered the tower. The scene changed. He stood in the center of an ancient circular arena. The deranged arsonist recognized Kang Yoo-seong and immediately broke into wild laughter, certain the Hero King would understand his art. Kang Yoo-seong only gave a cold laugh and remarked that there were too many lunatics in this world. Those words enraged his opponent. The sky filled with flames and countless instruments. Kang Yoo-seong moved with agile speed and leaped clear of the first wave of fire blasts. His opponent fired searing fire serpents from a trumpet and missed again. Kang Yoo-seong found it almost amusing. These fanatics were the easiest type to goad into losing control. His detached analysis only stoked the enemy's rage higher. A massive drum materialized above Kang Yoo-seong's head and came thundering down. His opponent thought he had landed the blow. Kang Yoo-seong sent the drum crashing aside. That level of attack had no chance of catching him. Then two enormous bronze gongs appeared and clamped him between them. Fire erupted and blazed inside the gongs. His opponent broke into gleeful, triumphant laughter. The thought of creating an immortal masterpiece with the Hero King thrilled him to the point of trembling. But Kang Yoo-seong's blade came slashing in from a completely different direction. He pointed out that the man had been looking at the wrong target. That was only an afterimage. His opponent barely dodged, clutching the wound on the back of his neck, unable to believe what had happened. Kang Yoo-seong had no interest in explaining himself and activated the window of the soul. Countless duplicates instantly flooded the arena. He said coldly that this would be his opponent's final performance. All the duplicates attacked at once, a wave that left no room to breathe. Cornered with no way out, the enemy's entire body erupted in a towering blaze. But at that very moment, a system notification broke through and declared the victory. Demon Tower rules protected all players. No one could take another player's life inside. The system asked him to choose between two exits. Based on everything he knew about the art-obsessed maniac, he chose the one leading to Country F without hesitation. Sure enough, that figure was stumbling along in frantic flight. Kang Yoo-seong's gaze sharpened and he gave chase with his sword drawn. He sent a sword wave laced with cold energy slicing straight into the man's back. In the next instant he had closed the gap, gathering the energy of a killing blow to finish it. The path his blade cut was suddenly stopped by an invisible barrier. Kang Yoo-seong looked up, and found a group of people standing in his way. Maria, leading them, ordered Kang Yoo-seong to drop his weapon immediately. Maria announced that she had come under orders to assist with the investigation. Kang Yoo-seong just smiled and asked her to take the man out for him. Maria flatly refused. He responded by pointedly sniping at her title as a holy maiden. She tried to reason with him. Vengeance only turned people into the very thing they despised. He shouldn't let someone like this drag him down to the level of a monster. Kang Yoo-seong brushed it off. Getting rid of a menace like this amounted to nothing in his eyes. Right then, the arsonist set himself on fire, not someone else's body, his own. Both of them froze, confused about how an attack had gone off inside the protective barrier. At that point, Maria spoke again, making her position clear. What she was here to protect was Kang Yoo-seong. She told him to leave, and said she would handle whatever came next. A flicker of hesitation crossed Kang Yoo-seong's face. In the end, he gave in and turned to walk away, but shadows spread silently beneath his feet, and the killing intent never left. A blade of pure darkness suddenly erupted and drove straight at the barely breathing criminal. Maria seemed to have anticipated it. Without even turning around, she blocked the strike. Kang Yoo-seong admitted with a quiet sigh that the ambush had admittedly been a waste of effort, but the shadow suddenly shifted shape, opening a vast maw that swallowed Maria's defense whole. Maria turned to find nothing but a glaring splash of crimson on the ground. She followed the trail of blood and caught up. Kang Yoo-seong was completely surrounded. The system reported that his provocation index was spiking. The Jester Sovereign was beside itself with delight. But he suddenly demanded, did any of them know how many people this madman had killed? Sometimes a black-rank player was more dangerous than a demon tower. Maria forced her emotions down and tried to argue back. Kang Yoo-seong cut her off. He understood her concern. He just wanted her to know that he didn't mind becoming the kind of monster everyone feared. But Maria told him to turn around. She said it to him plainly, one word at a time. You have never been a monster. The coldness on his face cracked just slightly at those words. The tension of the standoff finally eased. Then a shrill ringing cut through the air. It was Park Tae-shik, and he was furious. He blasted Kang Yoo-seong for acting recklessly and setting off an international uproar, and ordered him to board the first morning flight back immediately. Kang Yoo-seong looked at the note in his hand, and said there was still something he hadn't finished. He ignored the warning and hung up. Maria's voice came quietly from behind him, thanking him for being willing to help. He said he was just settling a debt. Maria heard those words and allowed herself a small smile of relief. He suggested she stay. She stood and said she'd see him in the morning. He shook his head at her coldness, but then noticed she seemed to be on the edge of saying something. Outside the door, the pretense of a smile fell away, and doubt filled her mind. Was it really all right to ask this of him? The next day, they stepped into a new demon tower. The scenario required them to protect the king and the nobility and hold back a pursuing revolutionary army. The carriage raced through a rain of arrows. Kang Yoo-seong fired back at the pursuers behind them with ice spikes. He proposed holding the enemy at the broken bridge ahead. Maria agreed with a nod. The bridge collapsed behind them. The pursuers were cut off on the far bank, howling in rage. The leader of the revolutionary army stepped forward and called out to the holy maiden with tears streaming down his face, demanding to know why she wasn't standing up for justice and the new era. Without the holy maiden's support, they could never achieve final victory. He begged Maria to come back to them and not stand with the monarchy. At that moment, Kang Yoo-seong finally understood why she had needed his help. Maria gave a silent nod, full of resignation. She had not been in this world for the first time. In her last visit, she had fought for the revolutionary army's ideals, but this time, those former comrades had become her enemies. Kang Yoo-seong asked if she wanted to switch sides. He could help with that, but for the sake of the mission, Maria shook her head and declined. In that case, Kang Yoo-seong decided to proceed with the original plan. Maria found herself quietly grateful that he was with her this time. The revolutionary commander was still shouting slogans, trying to reignite her belief. Kang Yoo-seong answered him with a merciless strike. He gave a final warning, retreat immediately. The commander refused without flinching, vowing to fight to the last for what he believed in. They put on specially crafted armor and formed up in a stance ready to face the visitor. The attack came suddenly, and the first cannon fire was aimed squarely at Maria. She leaped and dodged with quick instinct, then began to pray under her breath. Warm and powerful buff energy wrapped around Kang Yoo-seong in an instant. The world slowed in his eyes, every movement sharp and clear. Maria raised her shield and moved to charge forward, but darkness blotted out her vision. Kang Yoo-seong's voice came through, telling her to just hold her shield. He fought alone, relishing the new dimension of strength that came from the Holy Maiden's blessing. Sword light flared, and the enemy fell one after another. He was barely even straining. When the dark veil lifted, only silence remained on the battlefield. Maria shut her eyes, unable to bring herself to look at the carnage spread across the ground. Kang Yoo-seong reached a hand toward her and told her they needed to move to the next location. They had to catch the fleeing royalist faction, or everything would have been for nothing. Riding on Zhao He, Maria leaned against his back and let out a soft sigh. She had never meant for him to carry all the killing by himself. Kang Yoo-seong just laughed and said he was happy to. A complicated warmth stirred in Maria that she had no words for. The next city they arrived at was already swallowed in fire and chaos. The revolutionary army's purge order had turned it into a living hell. Maria stared with wide eyes, unable to believe what she was seeing. Kang Yoo-seong said quietly that battles of ideology had always been this brutal. Strangely, that eased some of the weight Maria had been carrying. Just then, the final leader appeared. Kang Yoo-seong once again had her step back and dealt with every enemy on his own. When the battle ended, the system declared the purge complete. Back in reality, reporters immediately closed in around Maria. Kang Yoo-seong noticed her ashen face and the stiffness in her expression. Maria was about to explain when Kang Yoo-seong jumped in. Deliberately using a suggestive tone, he said they had spent a passionate night together. Maria frantically denied his version in a loud voice. but Kang Yoo-seong kept playing dumb. The reporters went completely wild over the explosive rumor. The chaos unexpectedly delighted the jester sovereign. It also relieved the pressure, and Maria was finally able to manage the media. A generous reward dropped in, a package of shadow and assassination skill cards. Kang Yoo-seong took it with satisfaction. This trip had paid off handsomely. On the way back, his rumored relationship with Maria had already hit every major headline. At this point, claiming they were just friends would fool no one. Maria walked beside him with a cool, fixed smile, saying nothing. They stepped into a new demon tower. A dragon and frost skeletons came charging at once. Kang Yoo-seong asked her to give him a buff. Maria fired back on purpose, her tone so overly sweet it made his skin crawl. She charged ahead first, delivering lines that were painful to listen to. Attacking relentlessly with one hand while needling him with cold mockery with the other, Kang Yoo-seong could only sigh and quietly fall in with her rhythm. For a full month after that, the two of them somehow kept this bizarre dynamic going, clearing demon tower after demon tower. Before he left, Maria came to the airport to see him off. Kang Yoo-seong glanced back and jokingly brought up the farewell kiss custom. Maria couldn't help but comment on his personality, then admitted quietly that he was a teammate she could rely on. Kang Yoo-seong smiled a farewell and turned toward the boarding gate, but her voice carried from behind him, clear and unhurried. Thank you. Thank you for being willing to fight for this imperfect world. On the plane, those words echoed in Kang Yoo-seong's mind. He didn't feel like he was doing anything great. It was simply the most natural choice. The Xiaohei in his arms suddenly spoke, startling him. It calmly explained that evolving naturally came with the ability to speak. Kang Yoo-seong complained that it could have said something sooner, but Xiaohei turned the tables. It said it couldn't stand watching its owner bicker with women all day, and told him to get to work. That reminded Kang Yoo-seong of the card pack he still hadn't opened. He opened it with high hopes, wanting a genuine legendary card. This time, he finally pulled the steel multiplier he had long been after. He also gained the class of Shadow Assassin. The combination of darkness and assassination attributes would bring a massive boost. He hugged Xiaohei with excitement, and planned to test the new deck the moment he landed. After returning home, he had a new assignment, but on the way he drew stares from passers-by. People were surprised to see the Hero King walking into a bar in broad daylight. Inside the dim space, a figure was completely drunk and snoring away. Kang Yoo-seong's barely contained anger snapped, and he woke the man up with a sharp tongue lashing. The man was still deep in his hangover and had the nerve to demand who Kang Yoo-seong was. He even grabbed a glass and threw it, then started name-dropping his father's power and influence. Kang Yoo-seong laughed despite his fury and complimented the man's connections while patting his head, then grabbed him by the hair and dragged him out of the bar. He had originally gone to the association to test his new deck, but the guildmaster had pushed this promising newcomer onto him for a ride-along. Looking at the wasted rich kid in front of him, Kang Yoo-seong was thoroughly annoyed. The man sobered up slightly when he heard he'd be tagging along with the Hero King. Kang Yoo-seong held onto one last shred of hope, that at least his ability might be stronger than his character. They entered the demon tower. In front of them loomed ferocious butcher monsters. Kang Yoo-seong kicked him forward and told him to show what he could do. The young master shrieked and bolted, then turned around and ordered Kang Yoo-seong to fight. Kang Yoo-seong just watched with cold eyes. People like this, who relied on their gear and their connections, were never going to protect the world. He only stepped in when the young master was begging for help. The new skills Shadow Step and Blood Bind made a brilliant showing, finishing off every monster in an instant. He prepared to give the young master one more chance, but the man went straight back to threatening him with his father. The last thread of patience snapped, and Kang Yoo-seong's smile disappeared entirely. A ride with the Hero King wasn't something for people like him. The skill Dark Notice activated, and a death mark appeared over the man's head. The system warned that the benefit exceeded the available stat threshold. The young master burst and crumpled on the spot. Then the notification that the tower attack had failed rang out. Back in reality, the young master was still in a daze, unaware that he had just died once. Kang Yoo-seong helpfully pointed it out, only to receive a furious roar in return. The young master couldn't accept that an ordinary player had dared lay hands on him. Kang Yoo-seong found the whole thing laughable. He even stepped in close and raised a middle finger. He asked whether the man was planning to send assassins after him, but the number of people who wanted him dead was already countable in nations, not companies. One small corporation meant nothing to him. He poked the young master in the head, and the man seethed but didn't dare say a word. Just then, the system announced a Labyrinth update. The new season was about to begin. Kang Yoo-seong was selected and teleported into Labyrinth number 999. Looking at the new teammates who had already flopped onto the ground, he felt a headache coming on. One scoundrel, plus a bunch of rookies who had no idea what was going on. Someone recognized him as the Hero King and immediately burst into cheers. They naively believed that having him around made them absolutely untouchable. Kang Yoo-seong buried his face in his hand and felt himself going slowly insane. The Labyrinth rules appeared, laying out the cooperation requirements and the brutal elimination system. Players killed by other players could be revived, but anyone killed by the Labyrinth itself would be gone forever. Kang Yoo-seong looked up and let out a long groan. He had a feeling his teammates would be the death of him. Before entering the jungle, he used his protection ability to guide everyone through. Along the way, he fended off monster attacks on his own, while complaining non-stop about the terrible team composition. He felt like a mother hen herding a bunch of chicks. Sure enough, they were quickly singled out as easy prey. Kang Yoo-seong had his teammates cluster together and stood at the front with his sword. The enemy team burst out of the jungle. He cut down 3 of them with a single sweep of his blade. Under the rules, losing more than half a team meant the whole group was eliminated. The 2 survivors were seething with fury. Then labyrinth vines drove straight through both of them. The system ruled them as having failed the tower, meaning permanent death. Kang Yoo-seong paused. He hadn't expected that the ones he had killed could be revived, while the survivors were the ones who vanished for good. He couldn't help but find it bitterly ironic. At that moment, someone who had been watching from a tree had taken it all in. The person was shaken to the core and just wanted to alert their own team as fast as possible. But Kang Yoo-seong had already appeared behind them without a sound. He gave a cold smile at the man's attempts to bluster his way out. The man found his teammates, then led them off in the wrong direction. By the time his teammates realized something was off, they had already walked straight into the trap Kang Yoo-seong had set. The system kept announcing, team after team being eliminated. In the end, only their ragtag group of rookies remained. The newcomers cheered for the win. The system distributed the rewards, just 2 high-grade selection tickets. The system required a unanimous vote from the whole team, or no one could claim them. Kang Yoo-seong naturally assumed both were his. He asked if anyone had a problem with that. The young master chose this moment to push forward and demand one of the tickets. Another teammate who had made a small contribution also protested. The 2 of them argued without end and eventually had their swords out at each other. Kang Yoo-seong's patience finally hit its absolute limit. He moved instantly and dealt with both of his greedy teammates, then turned a cold eye to the 2 trembling rookies who remained, and asked them if they also thought they had earned a right to the reward. Both shook their heads frantically, terrified of ending up the same way. With no further obstacles, Kang Yoo-seong claimed all the rewards. Back home, Kang Yoo-seong opened the rewards with high expectations. The protection he received turned out to be fairly ordinary. He merged the newly acquired fire resistance with his existing abilities and upgraded them, and planned to try out the new abilities in a fire attribute demon tower next time. Xiao Hei protested immediately. It hated hot places. While they were still debating, the necklace Celia had given him suddenly glowed. The system notified him that a demon tower was summoning him with great urgency. He didn't hesitate. He gripped the keepsake and chose to respond at once. In the next moment, he was standing on an unfamiliar stretch of land. Celia had shed all traces of her youth. She had become a queen of commanding presence. Kang Yoo-seong greeted her with a smile. Her guards were instantly on guard, leveling their spears at him. Celia called them off sharply and openly acknowledged that she owed him more debts of life than she could count. Kang Yoo-seong asked what it was she needed his help with this time. Celia recounted what had happened over the years. A holy site had been seized by their elf kingdom. The old pope had died because of it. The new pope had issued a call to reclaim the Holy Land. 3 human kings had answered, joining forces to launch the Third Holy War, and their target was the fortress near the holy site. She turned to look at him and asked if he was willing to fight for them. Kang Yoo-seong looked into the distance and already spotted the Dragonheart King's banner flying. He calmly swapped out his skills. The system notified him that a new protection had activated. He raised his weapon with a smile and told her to leave everything to him. From atop the peak, he looked down at the enemy army flooding in like a tide below. He locked onto a knight through his scope. An ice spike took the knight's life without a sound. The enemy forces stirred immediately, raising shields blessed by flame. Kang Yoo-seong recognized the power of the flame's sovereign at work. He simply stepped off the cliff's edge and dropped. Xiao Hei caught him in time. At that same moment, his side's volley of arrows rained down on the enemy formation. The enemy taunted that a heretic's arrows could never pierce a divine shield. Before the words were even finished, an arrow went clean through the commander's head. The elves erupted in delighted surprise. The arrows truly did carry the enhancement their visitor had promised, and the enemy's main force was now being consumed by a strange creeping darkness. They cried out to the god of light in terror, but the darkness swallowed them whole. Xiao Hei stood at the edge of the battlefield, silently commanding the shadow magic. The Dragonheart King, Richard, rode in to try to rally his crumbling troops. He called out that no one should retreat before their god, and that the heretics had to be destroyed. But a massive black shape appeared behind him, and the entire unit was swallowed in an instant by a whale made of shadow. Then, from within the darkness, a crimson blade of light detonated. The Dragonheart King roared, and by sheer force of divine inspiration, he cleaved through the shadow shackles with a single strike. The remnants of his force screamed their fanatical war cries and launched another charge. That reckless, all-or-nothing intensity even caught Kang Yoo-seong off guard. The enemy came charging in with overwhelming force. Kang Yoo-seong turned and prepared to face them alone. Then, without warning, an explosion erupted right in front of him. The elf warriors charged to the front line with blazing fervor, swearing to wipe out every heretic. Kang Yoo-seong broke into a cold sweat. He had just remembered that his own side were equally fanatical believers. The battle raged fiercely, and for a time the elves held the upper hand. They were slowly closing in on the enemy commander, the Dragonheart King. But the king swung his great sword and cut down the advancing warriors with ease. Kang Yoo-seong met those savage, violent eyes. The final showdown was at hand. Ice and fire collided in a furious clash, like a duel written by fate. Kang Yoo-seong wanted to see for himself whether a dragon heart truly beat inside that chest. He activated his skill and branded the death mark onto his enemy. This strike was meant to expose a weak point and sharply drain the opponent's power. But the Dragonheart King, let out a thunderous roar, and refused to yield to any heretic. He turned his sword around and drove it into his own mount. The blood made his weapon blaze with an ominous red glow, and instead of weakening, his power surged. Kang Yoo-seong's chest tightened. The debuff had no effect on him at all. The Dragonheart King offered the blood to his god, praying for the strength to strike down the heretic. Even more powerful attacks followed in quick succession. Kang Yoo-seong was forced into a rapid retreat. He switched skills swiftly, several ice swords crystallizing in the air and firing out, but every strike was blocked one by that crimson great sword. The blood on the ground began to boil, forming countless bloody hands that reached toward the king. The hands coiled around him layer by layer, nearly consuming him whole. Kang Yoo-seong realized the blood was also compatible with his new skill, so he mapped out the final range of the technique. He raised his hand and quietly gave the command, "Rise." The enemy soldiers who had just been cut down and left for dead began to stir. The Dragonheart King initially laughed it off as a clumsy trick, but the next moment his roar cut off abruptly. The fallen soldiers truly had risen again, and were now charging at the king they had once served. Spikes burst from the bodies of the undead soldiers, riddling the Dragonheart King with wounds and blood. The system noted that the undead technique had low utility and deactivated the skill. The outcome was decided. Kang Yoo-seong walked slowly toward the defeated man. A flash of his sword, and he cut off that head without a moment's hesitation. The sunset bled red across the sky as he carried the Dragonheart King's head back to the queen. Queen Celia spoke with grave solemnity and reminded him that this was only one of the 3 so-called kings among the heretics he had defeated. Kang Yoo-seong gave a silent nod. The road ahead was still long. Late into the quiet night, he breathed in the lingering smell of blood and rust on his palm. He rubbed the dried blood from between his fingers and turned to leave. Just then, a faint green glow bloomed behind him. The figure of the shopgirl appeared. She reminded Kang Yoo-seong that his core skill had reached its maximum level. All he needed to do was upgrade the shop, and he could purchase a powerful awakening stone. Kang Yoo-seong finally let a smile cross his face. He spent an enormous amount of points and upgraded the shop to a higher tier. At the same time, he exchanged them for an awakening stone and a new frost sword technique. When daylight came, war arrived again right on schedule. His upgraded equipment made him utterly at ease against the enemy forces. Everywhere the frost passed, the enemy was turned into rigid ice sculptures. Yet the enemy's commander had not appeared once throughout. He looked toward the deathly silent command tent and decided to go in himself. Before he moved, Celia brought an unexpected piece of intelligence. Bloody Beard Balerbro had secretly relocated his camp the previous night, and the intelligence had leaked from inside the human camp. Kang Yoo-seong was surprised Celia saw it as an opportunity. She proposed that he lead an elite elf unit to carry out a decapitation strike. Kang Yoo-seong stepped into the tent. Frost spread from beneath his feet in an instant. The tent was dim inside, and a figure was seated at the center. He was about to speak when that figure simply slumped forward. The liquid in the cup spilled across the ground, giving off an ominous smell. Kang Yoo-seong understood in an instant. It was lethal poison. A wave of grim absurdity hit him. So-called holy war, no different from the games played back on Earth. Nations forever slaughtering each other for their own interests. With a true enemy right before them, they were busy with internal purges. He crushed the poisoned cup underfoot, contempt filling his chest. He brought the news back, and Celia was shaken. She surmised that this could only be the work of the High King. He wanted to eliminate his biggest rival on the eve of the Holy War, and claim all the glory and power for himself. Kang Yoo-seong added that they would also absorb the remnants of the allied army, and use them as fresh cannon fodder. Deep in the night, a mood of self-satisfaction filled the High King's tent. His subordinate reported that the Dragonheart King's death had been pinned on the elves. The High King smiled with satisfaction. Everything was in his hands. He would take in the dead king's troops under the banner of divine will. He ordered that the surviving forces of the other kings all be placed at the front lines, to serve as the ideal human shields and drain the enemy's strength. New war broke out again. The remnant soldiers charged with battle cries about avenging the god of light. History repeating itself. But if every enemy was killed, would that truly bring peace? He stopped turning it over in his mind and raised his hand to release the buff he had purchased from the shop. A warm westerly wind answered the call, washing over their side of the battlefield. He quietly threaded biting cold into the breeze. The warm wind suddenly transformed into a blizzard and drove straight into the enemy. The enemy used flame shields to resist the cold. They raised the Dragonheart King's inherited sword and prayed to the god of light. In that instant, the Light Sovereign and the Flame Sovereign both bestowed their blessings simultaneously. The Light Watchers joined the human faction. The enemy's morale surged, crying out that their god had never stopped watching over them. Then the Shadow Sovereign's blessing fell upon the elven archers. Their arrows transformed into invisible shadows, their power multiplying sharply. The Frost Sovereign was not to be outdone and sent down an even more savage blizzard. The battlefield had become a grinding machine, where the gods themselves wrestled for dominance. Kang Yoo-seong watched all of this madness with cold indifference. If this was the kind of war the gods wanted to see, then they were nothing but malevolent gods through and through. He waited no longer and threw himself into the battlefield. He just wanted this war to end as fast as possible. At that moment, the Shadow Council sent down 100 puppets. He crouched on the back of a racing shadow puppet and marveled at the scale of the support. But the enemy's reinforcements were equally staggering. The god of light had sent down 50 angels. Kang Yoo-seong locked onto the figure clutching a sword of light. The opponent shouted their faith and launched a fierce slashing strike. It was only then that Kang Yoo-seong noticed his opponent was wearing the same coat as him. A jolt ran through him. He wondered for a moment if his opponent might also be a player, but the opponent called him a foolish heretic and a visitor. Kang Yoo-seong immediately dismissed the thought. The two clashed intensely in the air. Kang Yoo-seong complained that his opponent could grow wings and fly wherever they pleased. A system notification sounded. The Shadow Sovereign had granted him a pair of wings. Enormous black wings spread open behind him. He felt a wave of exasperation. He hadn't meant to end up with wings of his own, but now it had turned into a full-blown aerial brawl. The High King, meanwhile, grew more excited with every exchange. He warned Kang Yoo-seong that abandoning the God of Light would not end well for him. Kang Yoo-seong asked with cutting sarcasm in return whether poisoning the Dragonheart King had also been the will of God. His opponent sidestepped the question and shattered his sword with a sudden strike, then declared with confidence that whatever he received was simply what God had willed. Just as the Sword of Light was about to land on Kang Yoo-seong, everything changed. The Kang Yoo-seong that had been struck suddenly shattered into an ice sculpture. His real self blinked into existence from behind and drove home a lethal backstab. It looked like the outcome was settled. But then a system alarm blared. An 8th grade archangel was about to possess the High King. Kang Yoo-seong watched helplessly as his opponent's wounds healed before his eyes. Even larger wings unfurled. Both sides received another wave of power, and the battle escalated again. Hellfire coiled around the Sword of Light, frost crept over the ice blade. Above and below, everything descended into chaos. Against the dark sky, only the light of their clashing blades flickered. With the Archangel's possession, the High King's power exploded, and Kang Yoo-seong began to fall behind. One of his wings was sliced off. His opponent pressed the advantage, the Sword of Light driving straight for his heart. Just as the opponent's face broke into a smile of victory, Kang Yoo-seong's severed wing suddenly erupted with countless spikes. The finishing blow from the frost swords that followed completed the job. Kang Yoo-seong let out a long breath that had been uncomfortably close. The system announced that the High King and the possessing Archangel had been destroyed. He knocked on the one wing he had left and regretted how much it had gotten in the way, then stepped onto his own sword and discarded the other wing as well. A gash was torn in the sky as the High King's body came plummeting down. The soldiers stared in stunned silence as the sovereign power fell. The system notified him that the historical timeline had been disrupted and his equipment would cease to exist. The cross pattern on his coat quietly vanished. At the same time, he received a new piece of equipment called Fallen and a massive sum of points. Kang Yoo-seong let out a breath. At long last, that insufferable war was over. The moment he returned to reality, blinding flashes and reporters surrounded him. He blocked his face, unable to understand why he hadn't ended up back home. A sharp-eyed reporter spotted that the cross on his coat had disappeared, and pressed him on what it felt like to be so far ahead of every other player. It was only then that Park Tae-shik came rushing over. He immediately picked up on something. The Kang Yoo-seong standing before him felt different somehow. Kang Yoo-seong took the microphone and said he was planning to say something outrageously inappropriate. The reporter's eyes all lit up at once when they heard that, but he dropped his voice and asked whether anyone here liked war. A stunned silence fell over the crowd. No one answered. He didn't mind and began painting a picture of what ancient battlefields looked like. Molten iron, arrows punching through bodies, intestines spilling out. Every detail drained the color from the faces around him. He then caught himself. That was the imagery of an older era. He shifted to modern warfare, missiles, machine gun fire sweeping through crowds, but the ending was just as brutal. He asked again, "A war like that, do you like it?" The reporters said no, one after another, because regardless of who won or lost, war meant nothing but fear and loss. In that moment, Kang Yoo-seong thought of what Celia had said after the war ended. She said that even though she had won, she felt deeply afraid. She wasn't certain whether this war, fought at such a cost in blood, was truly what the goddess had wanted to see. At the time, he hadn't understood the emptiness and heaviness that could follow a victory. Now, he gave a slow nod to the camera, and it made sense. Then he pivoted, and asked whether people liked heroes. The reporters nodded instinctively. Heroes were of course beloved. But Kang Yoo-seong let a sardonic smile cross his face. He pointed out that heroes were born from war. They were a byproduct of it. Hating war while glorifying heroes was a contradiction in and of itself. Was there perhaps a hidden desire for war lurking somewhere in the human heart? The reporters began murmuring amongst themselves. Kang Yoo-seong let slip another secret. Certain people in high places had been sending assassins after him every single season. The reporters erupted immediately, all clamoring to know who was behind it. At that very moment, his phone vibrated violently. A group of people in black came hurrying over. Kang Yoo-seong ignored them entirely and kept laying out the thoughts he had long been turning over. Even with the apocalypse on the horizon, humanity was busy killing each other, using players as weapons of the state, sending them to fight the nation's enemies rather than the world's enemies. It seemed everyone firmly believed that someone would win the season even without a hero. So then, why should he go out and save a world like this? Did this world actually deserve to be saved? The broadcast spread at lightning speed. Countless players felt those words hit somewhere deep. A dead silence fell over the scene, until one reporter shouted out passionately, "Yes, it does!" The reporter argued that players carried a responsibility they couldn't just walk away from. Kang Yoo-seong smiled, and the phantom of a jester-masked figure appeared behind him. The Phantom said if you can be a hero, you can just as easily be a villain. But he simply shook his head and said he was just thinking out loud. Before the words were fully out, Park Tae-shik came charging over and physically hauled him away. Even as he was being dragged off, Jang Yoo-seong turned back to face the cameras one last time. He told everyone to stop talking to him about mission and conviction. On the ride back, system notifications kept chiming. The sovereigns were overjoyed and sent a generous stream of rewards. Back at home, Park Tae-shik handed him a can of beer. Jang Yoo-seong had braced for a tongue lashing and felt a little on edge. But Park Tae-shik said that as the person who knew him best, he understood how much he had been carrying. A warmth stirred in Jang Yoo-seong's chest. But he deliberately said that the holy maiden knew him better. Park Tae-shik immediately pushed back with indignation, insisting she wasn't even close. Then showed off the legendary grade gear he had just obtained. He could see the exhaustion in Jang Yoo-seong's eyes, and invited him to go clear a demon tower together to clear his head. A stormy night. A short-haired woman slipped a note to her companion. She murmured that the deadline was before the meeting. After her companion left, she took out a pocket watch and found the hands had stopped. She whispered to herself that this pocket watch had been a gift from her godfather. Jang Yoo-seong and Park Tae-shik stepped into the rain at that very moment. The woman sensed that these might be the strangers the rumors spoke of. She approached without hesitation and opened with a request for their help. Her name was Rebecca of the Capone family. She then led the two of them to meet with the head of the family. On the way, she quickly explained the situation. Black York was secretly controlled by 5 major families. In 3 days, an important business meeting would determine the power structure. But shortly before, her godfather, the former head of the family, had been killed, along with the organization's top people, all cut down in the attack. She had once been a wandering orphan. Her abilities had awakened, and her godfather had taken her in as an adopted daughter. Out of the debt she owed him, she had fought desperately during the attack to save his son, who was now the nominal heir of the Capone family. She pushed open a heavy wooden door. Inside was a framed portrait of a middle-aged man. Then a chair slowly turned around, and a young child's voice came through. Park Tae-shik couldn't hold back a laugh and bluntly said the head of the family was a little kid. The boy Vito flushed red with fury and loudly defended his position. Rebecca did her best to smooth things over. She even told the strangers they simply didn't know greatness when they saw it. Vito was quickly appeased and announced they should get down to business. Jang Yoo-seong took a seat but immediately noticed Vito's restlessness. Rebecca spoke on the family's behalf. They needed to rebuild and seize power. More critically, the people behind the earlier attack had to be eliminated. Jang Yoo-seong asked who the suspects were, and Rebecca named the other families. The Gambino family, whose standing was unstable and who hungered for conflict, topped the list. Jang Yoo-seong thought for a moment and offered an extreme and simple solution. Kill everyone, and the problem solves itself. Rebecca agreed at once. Those people would have to be dealt with sooner or later anyway. But Jang Yoo-seong pointed out that the head of the family himself didn't seem to feel the same way. Vito quickly looked over at Rebecca. He stuttered out that Rebecca understood far more than he did. Whatever she decided was the will of the family. Jang Yoo-seong pressed him sharply. Did the boss himself want everyone killed? Vito said carefully that if someone wasn't the culprit, perhaps the relationship could be preserved. Then immediately shot a nervous sideways glance at Rebecca's expression. Only then did Rebecca allow a satisfied smile onto her face. She called the boss far too kind-hearted. Leaving the mansion, Park Tae-shik suggested starting with the nearest family, the Corleone. Jang Yoo-seong laughed and said the old man was starting to sound like a proper villain. Park Tae-shik laughed too and said he had always wanted to try it. They moved quickly. The Corleone family's guards were no match for them whatsoever. Park Tae-shik gave them the chance to surrender. They flatly refused. So he cleared the obstacle without a second thought. New enemies poured in, accusing them of ambushing before the meeting. Park Tae-shik picked one up and asked where the boss was. Got no answer and threw the man aside. He told Jang Yoo-seong to stay back. This time it was his turn to clear the way, telling Jang Yoo-seong to hitch a ride with him for once. Jang Yoo-seong agreed with a smile and used his frost to pave the path ahead. Park Tae-shik moved through the place like it was empty, hunting for the other side's leader. Just as the fighting was at its most intense, a winged figure swept past the rooftop above. Park Tae-shik's sharp eyes caught that enormous shadow. Jang Yoo-seong also noticed the unsettling detail. The bare branches around them were covered in jet black crows that had appeared from nowhere. After bringing down one family, they immediately turned to the next target. Jang Yoo-seong waited for Park Tae-shik at his leisure. Once Park Tae-shik finished, they went to eat together. Park Tae-shik couldn't help but grumble about the plain cheeseburger. Jang Yoo-seong ate with obvious relish. He asked Park Tae-shik what intelligence he had gathered. Park Tae-shik made a show of building suspense. Jang Yoo-seong waited through the whole performance, only for him to say he hadn't gotten anything. Jang Yoo-seong was left completely speechless. At that moment, the Gambino boss was frantically dialing calls. The continuous busy signals on the line made him increasingly agitated. He suspected that the Sanchez and Falcone families had already been taken out. After all, they were the ones who had planned the strike against the Capone family. He coughed up a mouthful of blood and recalled the threat the strangers had just delivered. The strangers told him his blood would clot and explode within 72 hours, unless they personally unsealed the pressure point on his chest. Under that terrifying form of control, he had no choice but to promise to withdraw from the race. Thinking back on it, he cursed them with everything he had. On Jang Yoo-seong's end, they were frustrated by the lack of anything useful. But Park Tae-shik had pinned his hopes on the multi-party meeting about to take place. His instincts told him that beyond the 5 major families, someone else was lurking in the shadows. Dusk settled in, and crows circled over the city, filling the air with dread. At the negotiation venue, the atmosphere was tense. 2 important seats remained conspicuously empty. Vito believed the absent parties were his father's killers. Rebecca tried to calm him down and urged him not to jump to conclusions too early. Vito had always taken his aunt's word without question, and he pressed his anger down for now. Then suddenly someone burst in with urgent news. In the adjacent room, Kang Yoo-seong and Park Tae-shik noticed the commotion as well. Word came through. The heads of both the Falcone and Sanchez families had been assassinated. A chill ran through Kang Yoo-seong. A new enemy had entered the picture. Park Tae-shik scoffed that the 5 major families really were pathetically weak. At that very moment, the entire venue was plunged into total darkness. A spotlight fell and the cloaked Night Crow made his entrance. In the name of justice, he issued a thunderous accusation against everyone in the room, condemning them for corruption, exploiting workers, and disrupting order. In the name of a hero, he declared that justice would be served here tonight. Countless crows flooded in with him and began attacking without distinction. Vito demanded to know whether he had killed those 2 bosses. The Night Crow admitted it freely, and said their deaths had been carried out the same way as Vito's father's. He called Vito the wicked spawn of a villain, and fired a killing feather with a flick of his hand. At the last possible moment, Kang Yoo-seong's shield absorbed the blow, and it was in that same instant that the Night Crow recognized Rebecca. Rebecca swore in that moment that she would make him pay. The Night Crow came at her in a fury. The system announced the appearance of the Dark Hero. Kang Yoo-seong understood now. This was the real enemy. Xiao Hei launched forward and bit down hard on the Crow King's wing. The Crow King flinched in pain and spun around. A sharp counterstrike sent Xiao Hei flying instantly. Kang Yoo-seong's eyes went cold and he closed the distance without hesitation. He reached out and grabbed that dark wing, and used the new skill. Expose weakness activated in an instant. The Crow King transformed into a small golden bird and began spilling his own secrets uncontrollably. Hidden feather knives, lethal explosives planted across his body. Reverting to his true form, the Crow King erupted in fury and came at him with even greater speed. But Kang Yoo-seong was already gone. Only an afterimage remained. He reappeared behind his opponent and called him a bomb maker. The Crow King, exposed, said nothing more and blew his whistle to call the final battle. The sky full of crows moved at his command. A relentless chain of explosions turned the battlefield into a sea of fire. Park Tae-shik was scrambling to dodge. He shouted out that this time it was his turn to take on the boss. Kang Yoo-seong just laughed with ease, and said he was fighting a hero, not a boss. Even as he spoke, his blade slid across the enemy's chest. The Crow King pressed a hand to the wound and asked in genuine confusion, why would a stranger lower himself to become the pawn of evil forces? He began listing the crimes of the Capone family, telling the story of how his own people had been killed. This city had long been corroded by money, and the law was nothing but decoration. He and his comrades were the true bearers of justice. He reached a hand out toward Kang Yoo-seong, wanting him to see the truth and stand alongside them. What answered him was a spike, driven home without mercy. Kang Yoo-seong said with distaste that he couldn't stand people who talked too much. He grabbed the mask of justice and tore it from the man's face, and found a face that had barely left boyhood staring back at him. The boy's eyes were filled with absolute resolve. The next second, he pressed the detonator in his hand without hesitation. The entire building began to shake. The boy laughed wildly and screamed out the final truth. That woman had set the killing trap long before any of this. Park Tae-shik shouted as he came sprinting over. Xiao Hei rushed in too, swallowing Park Tae-shik and snatching up Kang Yoo-seong in its jaws. It carried those who mattered most out of the inferno. The next morning, smoke still drifted through the streets. Rebecca thanked them. She expressed gratitude for keeping their word and helping the Capone family reclaim its power. But Kang Yoo-seong slowly raised his sword and leveled it at her throat. He asked whether all of this had been her plan from the very beginning. Rebecca kept her composure and asked what he meant. Kang Yoo-seong produced a feather as evidence. The Crow King had already laid bare everything she had done, colluding with outside forces, assassinating her godfather, eliminating the other families, all of it done to install a puppet and crown herself the underground queen. Rebecca suddenly smiled and claimed that everything had been for Lord Vito. She had done it to clear away every external threat and every internal cruelty for his sake. Kang Yoo-seong was unmoved. He pointed out that she had betrayed the man who gave her everything and played everyone around her. Park Tae-shik put it more bluntly. She had simply raised the boy to be useless. Rebecca let out a cold laugh and told them to ask Vito himself. Before the words were out, Vito was already standing in the doorway. Rebecca panicked in an instant, opening her mouth to explain but finding she had nothing left to say. The boy's eyes were full of disappointment as he slowly raised the gun. A gunshot rang through the quiet dawn, and the system's clear stage notification sounded. Back in reality, Park Tae-shik was still lamenting that he hadn't gotten to be the main character. That easy mood lasted less than a second before a subordinate came rushing in with urgency. He brought news that knocked the air from the room. A level 5 demon tower was on the verge of collapse. The tower in question had originally been under assault by an association team. After failing the first attempt, they had managed to pull out, but fell into panic. They were afraid that failing would cost them precious points, so someone put forward a reckless suggestion. Maybe selecting hard mode and trying again could salvage the score. Everyone froze. That was tantamount to suicide. But the sunk cost and the terror of being demoted had them by the throat. In the end, wishful thinking defeated reason, and they made their choice. The second attempt ended in a total wipe and triggered the tower's collapse directly. Kang Yoo-seong rode in a car toward the scene, his brow tightly knit, He understood the association's rules were harsh, but this was still inexcusably foolish. The phrase tower collapse dragged up a weight of dark memories. In the earliest seasons, it had been a disaster that erupted regularly, and every collapse had come at the cost of countless lives. Some of those lives had been the people who mattered most to him. Whether it had happened before or after he became a player, the wound still cut deep. But things were different now. He calmly reviewed and adjusted his skills and equipment. This time, he had to make certain there was no margin for failure. The vehicle arrived at the scene. The sky above was warped by a massive, pulsing halo. Players who had barely made it out looked at him as if they were seeing salvation itself. Kang Yoo-seong just frowned in irritation and locked his gaze on the center of the disturbance. The system began its merciless countdown, announcing that the collapse was imminent. He calmly announced that everyone who met the criteria should clear the battlefield immediately. Anyone who might get caught in his attacks, anyone who couldn't keep up with his pace. Then he added with a smile, "That means everyone except me." The countdown hit 0 and horrifying monsters poured out like a flood. Dark shadows spread from beneath his feet and transformed into blades that swept through the creatures. He cut through the mass, but a question rose in his mind. These monsters, varied as they were in form, had nothing to do with the tower's original setting. Where had they come from? Just then, the sound of a helicopter broke through from overhead. The media was doing a live broadcast on the scene, noisily sensationalizing the crisis. Kang Yoo-seong fought and complained at the same time. The reporters were so dedicated it was absurd, practically calling out respawn points for the monsters. The system suddenly blared a sharp warning. The final boss had arrived. The bottomless pit slime appeared. Kang Yoo-seong didn't recoil. He almost smiled. This was exactly the kind of opponent he wanted. He fired ice spikes in rapid bursts but couldn't fully break it apart. It looked like he was going to need a one-hit killing blow. Without hesitation, he unleashed his fully upgraded powerful skill. A colossal ice spike and a net-like wave of binding force erupted simultaneously. The slime was sliced, shattered, and broken into countless fragments. The shadows, waiting for their moment, opened a vast maw and swallowed it whole. The system announced that the collapse had been halted and granted a reward. Kang Yoo-seong closed his hand around the gemstone. The media's cameras had already converged from every direction. The news swept across the entire world in an instant. The Hero King had once again saved everything, alone. Kang Yoo-seong faced the cameras and exposed the association's corruption without mercy. It was those unreasonable rules that had caused the incident in the first place. Park Tae-shik watched the coverage, and was very satisfied with the effect of this wave of public pressure. He seized the moment and proposed his vision, establishing an independent player corps. Kang Yoo-seong thought the idea was impractical. It wouldn't even hold up legally, but Park Tae-shik believed. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He planned to ride the public's fury at the association to push for the abolition of those rules. Kang Yoo-seong told him to go for it like it was none of his business, but Park Tae-shik said that the commander of this corps had to be him. Kang Yoo-seong froze. He hadn't seen that coming at all. Park Tae-shik pointed out that it was the will of the people, and he had no choice. Soon the petition numbers exploded, and the poll results were overwhelmingly one-sided. The vast majority of people wanted the Hero King to build the new core. Association Director Lee Sung-ho saw the news and nearly flew into a rage. He believed letting players govern themselves was no different from releasing monsters. Those top-tier players were themselves walking uncontrollable bombs. His approach to managing them was the only sensible one. As he was still fuming and cursing, a low voice spoke up behind him. A system notification informed him that the Sovereign of Evil had taken a keen interest in him. As if compelled by some unseen force, Lee Sung-ho accepted the invitation. At that moment, Kang Yoo-seong was walking the streets. He spotted an advertisement featuring himself and felt a wave of exasperation. He thought back to Park Tae-shik's passionate lobbying and his grand vision from that night. He believed Kang Yoo-seong had the power to change the world. But Kang Yoo-seong resisted inwardly. He felt the only thing he should be doing was clearing towers, but the system informed him that there were no demon towers above level 7 anywhere nearby. He could only pin his hopes on the keepsakes he had received before, and wait to be summoned. Just then, a tremendous noise erupted across the streets. Every public screen was forcibly switched to the same message. An announcement rang out: a Grade A competitive demon tower was about to take place, requiring the top 10 players from the previous season to compete in a global livestream. Kang Yoo-seong was baffled. He had completely failed to anticipate this move from the system. Then the system followed up with rules that were even more merciless. No one would die inside the demon tower, but should the entire group fail to clear it, the consequences would be horrifying. 100 million lives would be randomly erased from the world. Fury shot up Kang Yoo-seong's spine in an instant. This was no competition, it was outright extortion, but he had no choice. To stop that insane punishment from being carried out, he had to walk into this game with a chest full of rage. When he entered the waiting area of the demon tower, 8 players were already there. When they saw Kang Yoo-seong appear, quite a few couldn't hide their relief. Someone greeted him warmly. Kang Yoo-seong looked over these so-called top players and felt not a trace of joy at the reunion. When Maria saw him, the stone she had been carrying in her chest finally settled. She couldn't help but bring up how utterly drained he had looked last time. His condition back then had kept her worried day and night. A quiet warmth moved through Kang Yoo-seong. He took her hand and made a sincere promise not to give up so easily again. But an impatient voice cut in at that moment. Lei Chang, the swordmaster, mocked him for being the last coward to arrive. Kang Yoo-seong fired back, pointing out that his opponent was always charging in recklessly, which was exactly why he kept losing to himself and the gravedigger. He then turned and asked the gravedigger why he hadn't even brought basic gear. The gravedigger, Gaio Lecter, replied calmly that he simply hadn't started clearing towers yet, but he was sure it wouldn't be a problem. After all, Every person in the world was watching them on a screen right now. Sure enough, a system notification sounded. The top-tier seasonal gear was distributed to everyone on the spot as a temporary provision. The gravedigger smiled and said dying was now even less likely. The powerhouse Lydia leaned in close to Maria and scoffed at the pettiness of men competing with each other. General Kilgore added in a low, measured voice, emphasizing the importance of the mission. The gravedigger quietly reminded everyone to be very careful about what they said here. Just then, a man wearing a jester's mask appeared. He announced that this was a celebration the sovereigns had put on for them. Kang Yoo-seong smiled and asked if it was to celebrate the deaths of the other sovereigns. The masked man's tone cooled and warned him not to push too far. The swordmaster had reached his limit. He refused to accept that lives could be treated as entertainment. Before the words were out, he had already unleashed the 9 sword techniques in a fierce assault. 9 sword beams, sharp and without equal, drove straight through the masked man's body, but the attack was ruled invalid. The man was completely unharmed. The masked man picked up a microphone and began laying out the brutal rules. Neon lights flashed as he invited the global audience to vote for the hero of their choice. Sure enough, a voting interface popped up on every screen in the real world. Kang Yoo-seong was about to expose the fact that the votes would be rigged, but the masked man clapped a hand over his mouth. The masked man smiled and said they also had rules they had to follow. All the heroes needed to do was give the audience their very best. High votes brought rewards, low votes meant failure, and failure meant 100 million deaths. Maria felt a suffocating wave of fury and helplessness. The sword master Lei Chang fixed his eyes hard on Kang Yoo-seong. He called loudly for an arena to be opened, a showdown against the hero king. The masked man praised his professionalism and granted it in an instant. The void twisted and shifted, and a magnificent arena rose from nothing. Kang Yoo-seong let out a helpless sigh and asked the swordmaster one last question. His tone was dismissive. Did he really want to relive the taste of crushing defeat? Those words set the swordmaster's fury fully ablaze. He swore to avenge the humiliation of his loss on the first day and came at him with his sword. The sword light wove into a dense net, dazzling and lethal. Kang Yoo-seong was forced into the fight and had no choice but to reveal his hand. The next second, something that stunned everyone happened. He used the exact same 9 sword techniques. Everyone gasped. The swordmaster was the most astonished, suspecting a connection to the mirror sovereign. But on closer look, the sword intent was subtly different from his own. When the 2 swords locked, Kang Yoo-seong suppressed him in pure swordsmanship. The swordmaster couldn't accept it. A lifelong devotion to the sword surpassed. The gravedigger said with sincere admiration that this was the hero king in his perfect form. Who among those present would dare dream of cutting down a king like this? The powerhouse woman laughed at that, and asked who wanted to take him down more than anyone else. The gravedigger shook his head, and said her view was too narrow. He gestured at all the burning, hungry eyes around them. Those were the ones who truly hungered for it. And in the midst of all that uproar, Maria's face had gone completely white. She couldn't understand, with 100 million lives hanging in the balance. These people had nothing in their heads but how to defeat the hero king. She recalled something Kang Yoo-seong had once said, and now felt it fully. Even on the eve of the world's end, everyone was busy killing each other. She thought back to the first and second seasons. It had been so completely different. Everyone had been united, clearing towers for the sole purpose of saving the world. That pure, simple conviction was gone now without a trace. In the stands, every gaze turned toward the arena was full of calculation, and she had noticed. The stronger the players became, the stronger the demon towers and their kings grew. It was as though this were a brutal, endless race of escalating evolution. Down in the arena, the duel had reached its most intense point. The swordmaster's mind was filled with confusion. The strangeness of how the battle was going was beyond his understanding. There had to be some secret behind the hero king's strength. He was certain that if he could find the key, he could win. The wound on his chest stung sharply, but he only felt more excited. A temporary loss didn't matter, he just wanted to see the essence of that power. But then Kang Yoo-seong's voice suddenly turned cold. He said he had grown tired of playing along with his opponent's abilities. The next second, a sharp savage kick sent the swordmaster flying hard. He was going to make him see the gap between them clearly. The long sword drove into the ground, and cracks spread across it like a web. Then he activated his secondary deck. The moment the smoke burst apart, his whole appearance transformed. His hair cascaded down like a waterfall, and a crimson light blazed in his eyes. This was the mythic skill. Heavenly Demon Descends. He hovered in the air, like a true demon god come down to the mortal world. The swordmaster coughed blood, and genuine fear finally rose in his eyes. Heavenly Demon's first sword, Cleave. The words fell, and the blade was already there. Countless invisible slashes completely overwhelmed the swordmaster. Blood sprayed, and he lost every ability to fight back. Heavenly Demon's second sword, Erase. A torrent of terrifying energy came surging out and consumed everything in its path. The red light lit up every face in the crowd, shock written across every one of them. When the light faded, all that remained in the arena was a deep crater. The masked man announced the overwhelming victory at the top of his voice. In the live voting, the hero king held an absolute lead. The swordmaster knelt in the rubble, his spirit completely shattered. Kang Yoo-seong maintained the heavenly demon stance and walked toward the audience seats. The dark aura swirling around him made the air feel impossible to breathe. He seemed to be heading toward the gravedigger, then a massive skeleton materialized behind him, the iconic equipment and skill of the gravedigger's class. Everyone was stunned. The spectators cried out in disbelief, asking whether he was even human anymore. Kang Yoo-seong swept his gaze across all the shocked faces, and asked with a smile if this was their first time seeing this kind of copying ability. The gravedigger and the powerhouse immediately pointed out that this was no ordinary copy. Any other copy could only mimic the form. It couldn't hold power this strong. The smile on Kang Yoo-seong's face deepened, as if he was thoroughly enjoying their confusion. He finally lowered his voice and let out a secret. He had long since formed a contract with the Sovereign of Truth. From that point on, he could only speak the truth. Even now, broadcast to the whole world, the gravedigger only cared about one thing. Was he the next target for a duel? Kang Yoo-seong shook his head and said he despised pointless fighting above all else, especially fools who couldn't judge their own limits and had the nerve to challenge him. He proposed that from now on, everyone could only speak the truth. The masked man cheered loudly and transformed the arena into a podium. Kang Yoo-seong tapped the microphone and let his voice carry to the entire world. He reminded the audience that this vote was a matter of life and death for 100 million people, and warned them not to treat it as carelessly as voting for a president in a certain country. The gravedigger immediately warned him to watch his words, but Kang Yoo-seong turned on the gravedigger with a knowing smile, and asked if he was afraid of what might slip out about his dream to revive the Third Reich. Those words hit like a thunderclap. The gravedigger's face went iron gray in an instant. He raged that there was no evidence for such a public accusation. Kang Yoo-seong calmly explained that the contract allowed him to peer into lies and secrets. Everything he said was fact, beyond any doubt. The gravedigger erupted in fury and sent a wave of skeleton soldiers surging forward. Kang Yoo-seong replicated the exact same techniques and kept speaking. He remarked that the scoundrels in this arena were far more than one or two, then named Count Pyramid. The Count tried to keep his composure and started making excuses, but Kang Yoo-seong laid bare his dream of restoring the empire without hesitation. The Count's fury ignited completely, and his attacks came fast and vicious. Kang Yoo-seong's skeleton servants absorbed every killing blow for him. Then he turned his sights on Lieutenant General Kilgore. He asked with a smile whether the general who had a fondness for napalm was present, exposing that he had a habit of indiscriminately dumping incendiary bombs on enemy nations. A warmonger who was thoroughly addicted to conflict. The general finally had enough and came roaring at him in a charge. Kang Yoo-seong caught that fist with one hand and didn't blink. The general erupted in rage and unleashed his unique skill, summoning pitch-black fighter jets. The other players scrambled in panic, terrified of being caught in the disaster. But the next second, an equal number of jets materialized from behind Kang Yoo-seong. The two groups of jets collided and detonated in a catastrophic explosion of fire across the sky. The general hadn't imagined his signature technique could be perfectly replicated. The gravedigger accused him of destroying his comrades' reputations. But Kang Yoo-seong's expression darkened, his voice dripping with contempt. These so-called comrades, hadn't they been stabbing him in the back all along too? The system informed him that his provocation index was spiking at a staggering rate. But Kang Yoo-seong understood. Even laying out every truth in the open wouldn't change the world. The gravedigger gave a cold laugh and sneered that he was throwing a childish tantrum at the world. Kang Yoo-seong admitted it freely. He simply couldn't play along with the old men's theater anymore. He made a wish to the Jester Sovereign, and the setting changed in an instant. He was about to ask for the skill, Heavenly Demon Descends, when the host cut in just in time and announced it was someone else's turn. At that moment, Maria raised her hand. She asked if she could have the floor. She had something important to share. The masked host agreed with delight and set up a lavish stage for her. The other players were arranged in comically small audience chairs. Kang Yoo-seong laughed and said it looked like a grade school showcase. Maria coolly ordered him to be quiet. Kang Yoo-seong deliberately said, "Yes, dear." Those words made Maria's expression even harder. She took a slow, deep breath and announced that she was here to reveal the Hero King's true self. Silence fell over the entire space. Every player was struck dumb. Even the audience had not expected the Holy Maiden to suddenly turn her aim in this direction, and Kang Yoo-seong, who had been completely at ease just moments before, was rattled. He tried to stop Maria, but she asked on purpose, "What's the matter, dear?" The corner of her mouth lifted, and she told it all anyway. When the competition ended, the system began announcing the final voting results. The top three were the Hero King, the Holy Maiden, and the Gravedigger. But the vote count was astronomical, obviously fabricated again. He didn't particularly care, as long as the rewards were actually useful. He now truly possessed the skill Heavenly Demon Descends. That was when he thought of the mythic equipment he had earned by defeating the Plague Sovereign. Using it without passing the qualification trial would trigger a backlash. In the best case, his stats would drop. In the worst, it could cost him his life. The Swordmaster had once failed for exactly that reason last season and paid a heavy price. But Kang Yoo-seong was different. He had already passed it once last season. He had confidence in himself and believed he could endure the trial again. With his mind made up, he decided to activate Heavenly Demon Descends. The system asked him to prove his qualification. He was transported to a barren stretch of land and stood before an old man wearing a wide-brimmed hat. Kang Yoo-seong came straight to the point, demanding they get it done fast and complete the transaction. The system announced the start of the trial. He needed to withstand 2 strikes from the Heavenly Demon. The old man drew his sword, and the first strike came sweeping down with crushing force. Kang Yoo-seong blocked it with everything he had and felt his whole body go numb afterward. But he had seen this move before and kept his composure. The second strike was a blast of red energy with terrifying power. He swung his sword and broke through it. The two of them traded blows in a shower of sparks. The old man's expression finally changed. Kang Yoo-seong had thought the trial was over and that the contract could now be made, but the old man suddenly gave a cold laugh and asked about the sovereign he had killed. A bad feeling rose in Kang Yoo-seong's chest, and he asked why he was bringing that up. The old man spoke words of admiration, but the ground beneath their feet began to shake and crack. They stood in empty space, and the trial showed no signs of ending. The old man attacked again, ordering him to show his true sword. Kang Yoo-seong scrambled to respond, not understanding why the trial was still continuing. He felt his life in genuine danger, and begged the old man to ease up. But the old man accused him. His sword was full of confusion and uncertainty. If that was the sword that had slain a sovereign, he could not give his approval. Kang Yoo-seong was both frustrated and furious. If his swordsmanship could truly beat the heavenly demon, why would he have gone through all this trouble to come here for the summoning trial in the first place? At those words, the old man shifted his approach entirely. He put away his sword, lifted his leg, and brought his foot down. Just one stomp, and the earth collapsed beneath them. The force was terrifying. Then a second kick came, and sent Kang Yoo-seong flying more than 10 meters. Kang Yoo-seong gasped for breath, completely unable to make sense of the old man's intent. The old man brought up again the fact that Kang Yoo-seong had killed several sovereigns. Perhaps the answer he had been searching for lay within Kang Yoo-seong himself. As the words fell, the old man's white hair turned black, and he was instantly restored to youth. His presence surged, and he declared he would conduct the test again, with 3 swords this time. The first strike came down overhead with the force of annihilation. Kang Yoo-seong froze completely in place. The first sword passed, and he found himself completely unharmed. He checked his body in disbelief, unable to tell what had been cut away. The old man sheathed his sword, and in his voice was a loneliness worn smooth by long ages. He had walked the mountains and rivers his entire life, searching only for someone who could defeat him. Yet the strongest of all, even the envoys of gods, had all fallen to his sword. He had never been able to grasp the true meaning of defeat. Even the messengers of death sent for him, he had defeated as well. Sitting alone at the mountain's peak, he had come to feel that everything was without meaning. Until he encountered Kang Yoo-seong, the one who had killed a sovereign. A faint, fragile flicker of expectation stirred within the old man. Just then, the skin on Kang Yoo-seong's face began to split and peel away. The old man asked whether he too would vanish like all the others. Larger patches of skin crumbled away, and images flashed through Kang Yoo-seong's mind. From the moment he first encountered the Jester Sovereign, to joining the association, to clearing tower after tower, and finally settling on the image of Maria speaking gently before the media. She had said that, deep down, the Hero King was infinitely tender and fragile. He was someone who would cry like a child when a comrade was lost. Every time a casualty came from his own failure, he had wept for an entire week straight, and it was only she who had been there, quietly listening to all of his pain. As the memories surged, the shell over Kang Yoo-seong crumbled completely away. He collapsed heavily to the ground, as though drained of every last trace of life and strength. The last light in the old man's eyes dimmed, leaving only endless disappointment. He was preparing to accept the void when Kang Yoo-seong's voice rose at that moment. Kang Yoo-seong asked him, what kind of answer was he looking for exactly? One about defeat, about death, or about the meaning his life had never been able to find? Kang Yoo-seong thought of what Maria had said after all of that. She said that even through all that suffering, even having been broken apart, Kang Yoo-seong had not given up. He kept on fighting for the world. Even if the thing itself might hold no meaning whatsoever, he had already come to understand, you can destroy what exists, but you cannot destroy nothing. By the same logic, things that hold meaning can be destroyed, but things without meaning can endure. Wasn't that exactly the ultimate truth that the 3 swords of the heavenly demon pointed toward? The old man walked toward him step by step, convinced that Kang Yoo-seong was lying. He refused to believe that the Hero King who protected the world was simply a fool who protected meaninglessness. Kang Yoo-seong quickly explained, protecting the world really did have no meaning. In this world, half the people were playing the role of hero saving the world, while the other half were killing each other with guns. The old man fell silent for a moment, and finally let out one long deep sigh. He withdrew his sword and said he looked forward to their next meeting. His figure dissolved into the wind, leaving only the lingering resonance of understanding behind. A system notification sounded, declaring that Kang Yoo-seong's qualification had been proven. From now on, he could freely use the divine technique Heavenly Demon Descends. True. Hearing that, all the strength left him at once, and he dropped to the ground. After lying down, he realized he had a slight fever. Xiao He asked worriedly, but he refused to admit it, saying he had just been angered. The internet was full of absurd posts imitating him crying and throwing tantrums at the Holy Maiden. He was furious enough to want to tear through a higher-level demon tower to vent his rage. Xiao He reminded him helplessly that those towers weren't unlocked yet. He did the math, at least another month to wait. He had no choice but to let it go, to release the pent-up destructive energy and frustration that had nowhere to go. Xiao He brought him to a level 3 demon tower called Song of Steel. Kang Yoo-seong didn't have anything particular in mind. He just wanted to break things. Without hesitation, he activated his newly acquired mythic skill. The old man's phantom appeared alongside the sword's light and merged into him. As tremendous power surged in, searing pain also tore through his body. He coughed up a mouthful of blood. Through the unrelenting agony, he could only curse that old man in his head. The ability loaded completely. He could feel clearly that he had been transformed from the inside out. The force of of the loading shattered the first layer of the tower. The half-orcs on the second floor roared as they came charging out. He dealt with them all without even trying, dispatching every enemy in a single move. Sitting on the enemy's remains, he noticed something unusual in his skill list. Within Heavenly Demon Descends, there existed an unrecorded third technique, a nameless move, as if it corresponded to meaninglessness itself. Just how far could the power of that sword reach? Carrying that question, he arrived before the door of the final floor. The system notified him that the deposed sovereign would fuse with the sword's sovereign. Kang Yoo-seong stopped short in surprise. He realized that man had once been one of the sovereigns. That was why he had reacted the way he did upon learning that Kang Yoo-seong could slay sovereigns. The system issued another warning. Countless sovereigns were watching him at this very moment. He felt the invisible pressure settle over him, like being stared at from the abyss. He took one deep breath at last and pushed open the door to the final stage. The great Demon King roared and came at him. He swung his sword, struck, and the motion was pared down to the absolute essentials. The Demon King was annihilated. This was the heavenly demon's true power, and its magnitude set his chest surging. But the sword in his hand began to shake violently, the power teetering on the edge of losing control. Different forces inside it tangled in a frenzy. His body still couldn't fully contain it. The heavenly demon began again to speak of the world's meaninglessness. Kang Yoo-seong gritted his teeth and resolved to press every restless force back down. Whatever this power's origin, it was his now. He drove the sword hard into the ground and suppressed the rampaging power by sheer force of will. The impact was so great it shook the tower's very structure, and morning light spilled in. Looking at the breaking dawn, even he had to admit that had been genuinely cool. After returning to reality, he immediately contacted Park Tae-shik. The call connected, and Park Tae-shik greeted him with the nickname Hero King Crybaby. Kang Yoo-seong answered in kind with a joke, then finally got to the point. He needed a sparring partner to test and get used to his new power. Park Tae-shik complained with his mouth but moved with astonishing speed. He showed up quickly with a team in tow, and told him to lay out his sparring conditions. Kang Yoo-seong said the others could come fully armed, while he would use only the one core skill, Heavenly Demon Descends, no divine artifacts, no additional enhancement effects. Before the words were out, a thick green liquid was spreading from beneath his feet. Kang Yoo-seong produced a dagger of grotesque and unsettling shape. Everyone watching was rattled by the terrifying sight. Park Tae-shik recognized the aura of the plague sovereign immediately. He demanded to know sharply whether Kang Yoo-seong had truly passed the trial. A glint of something dangerous flickered in Kang Yoo-seong's eyes. Then he broke into an easy smile and said he was joking. Everyone let out a collective breath of relief. They had genuinely been frightened. Kang Yoo-seong called everyone into the demon tower. But Park Tae-shik made one serious request first. He asked him not to let his people die in too much pain. Kang Yoo-seong smiled and promised they would be gone before they even knew it. Then he lit a string of firecrackers as the signal. The moment they went off, the assault began. Kang Yoo-seong handled the opening waves without effort. Park Tae-shik charged in personally, throwing his weapon as a feint. Kang Yoo-seong had seen it coming and deflected the sneak attack with ease. The next second, Park Tae-shik's figure split into several flying daggers. Kang Yoo-seong bent back nimbly to dodge, but found the daggers were connected by wires. The threads wove a net in the air, and the others slid down the lines to attack. The elegance of the coordination gave Kang Yoo-seong a genuine flicker of excitement. He cut through the wires, only to find floor tiles had been threaded together as weapons. He wove through the chaotic barrage of attacks and finally jumped clear of the encirclement. He needed to find the one pulling the strings first. He locked his gaze on the rooftop and leaped to stand before the person there. Lee Si-ya was startled too. She scrambled to dodge the attack, and Park Tae-shik came at him at the same moment. Caught between them from both sides, Kang Yoo-seong simply leaped straight into the air. The power of both blades doubled in the air and came thundering down. Park Tae-shik and Lee Si-ya were knocked flat by the blow. Kang Yoo-seong landed lightly and even took a moment to enjoy the view. He crouched in front of Park Tae-shik and asked politely whether they wanted to keep going. He figured this was probably about the right time to call it and leave. But Park Tae-shik suddenly asked him, had he ever thought about using his power to conquer the world? Kang Yoo-seong laughed. How would that even be possible? But Park Tae-shik said that if it were him, it might actually be. Not long after, they cleared the demon tower. Park Tae-shik kicked his fallen colleagues and told everyone to get up. The subordinates who had died in the game stirred back to consciousness in a daze. Park Tae-shik started discussing the next sparring session with him. But then the system notification sounded again. An alternate history demon tower was summoning player Kang Yoo-seong. The one requesting assistance was none other than Lieutenant General Kilgore. Kang Yoo-seong hadn't expected him to have this much nerve. Irritation stirred in him immediately, but he was worried that refusing might cause the tower to collapse. He waited for a moment and decided to accept the summons. He announced his decision to Park Tae-shik, who looked surprised beside him. It seemed he was heading to Country M,